Greetings, everyone. This is Doug Walker, and I am going to be doing this commentary on the last of these really big anniversaries that you're going to be seeing from thatguywiththeglasses.com. I don't know if we won't be doing any more, but I mean, certainly no more of this height, of this size and caliber. The main reason being that this is pretty much the hardest production I ever worked on, maybe even like the hardest thing I ever worked on, while trying to put all this stuff and squeeze in such a tight amount of time and do, essentially maybe like six hats of work and stuff like that. Hardest thing I ever worked on, and it still wasn't enough. So many people were still really having trouble with it, really, trying their best and pulling through and just really suffering through all of it, and I just do not want to be in the business of that, of having people like, really have to work their way through this, and really go through hard times, that's just not what I want to do. I want these productions to be fun. I want them to be, I want people to enjoy themselves, even if it is work. And I mean, granted, we don't force the people out here. We don't hold a gun to their head. I mean, they're invited, I mean, they can, there's certainly people that didn't turn up the first year and we didn't give them a bad eye or anything like that. But at the same time, when you're doing a production, you want to run it as smoothly as possible, and you want these people to be comfortable. And when you have to shoot, yeah, a 3.5 hour movie in 6 days. Maybe it was just a naivete that I thought it would run smoothly, but in a lot of ways it did. I mean, because there weren't as many problems with Suburban Nights, but the hours were just going so late, and the scheduling, which of course I was in charge of, it got just really, really delayed, and people were staying up, just late nights and not getting much sleep. I mean, myself included. And like I said, it's the only way to make these productions more comfortable in the shooting of it is to have is to devote even more time to it. Now, for those who don't know, I'm already doing 3 shows a week, and going to cons, and just got married, and trying to do, about 6 jobs on here that one person alone would probably find difficult. So chances are, I mean, I'll just spray myself too much and too thin and yada, yada, yada. But with that said, holy smokes, this turned out really friggin' cool. And, I think one of the things about it is that everyone just put their heart and soul into it and just worked super, super hard, and the dedication, the passion, everything really, really shines through. And I am so pleased with how this turned out, and I am just so happy. And it came, with every production, you're always gonna be like, "They didn't come out how I wanted it." Yeah, this came out pretty friggin' close. I mean, even stuff I thought wasn't gonna turn out that well, I mean, just turned out so great. And the performances were great, and the people behind the scenes were great, and everyone just threw their all into it, and blah, 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 blah. You know how hard everybody worked. And yeah. Oh, yeah. One last thing before I get to the funny stuff. The other reason I didn't want to do another one of these quite on this scale anyway is that I was saying that you had to devote more time. Well, sure, whatever. That's just more time. Like I said, it had to be devoting even more time than I already have. And like I said, time is just now becoming very valuable to me, and I'm realizing more and more just how much it does take out of you. You always sort of say, "Oh yeah, I can do that. Oh yeah, I can do this. I can do that." And finally, at some point, it just catches up. But like I said, we did this in 6 days, which is still pretty unbelievable for it to look like this and be a 6 day shoot. And so much of that really is just to the people working their asses off and just committing to the madness, as I call it. So these credits were done by Merobot. Did a wonderful job. Skitch did the music. There's all our effects people who also all work their asses off. And the one mistake I made realizing, look at these opening credits, is that when it shows the picture of Noah and his name is next to it, I should have just had a picture of him as his normal Spoonie character, because we're going to see him upside down as Turl later. I was just like, I messed that up. But nitpick. Okay, let's try starting with the writing process. the way this started out is after Suburban Nights was wrapping up, we sort of knew we wanted to do something sci-fi related. Uh, I didn't really have too many ideas. I had one or two, maybe the house going into space. You know, there'd be a way to sort of save money and stuff, but not a ton. And Rob sort of came up with this idea, and he said, you know, it's just there's this anomaly, and it's causing trouble, and everything's going upside down, and all these things are, you know, going wrong, and the critic and everybody have to go, and they have to find out what it is. And well, okay, what is it? Because that's a lot of buildup. And he said it's a plot hole. As soon as I heard that, I'm like, oh my God, I love this idea because there's so much you can do with that. There's so much you can get away with. I mean, hell, we've pretty much, in a sense, just sort of written ourselves out of every mistake we've ever made because we could always just say, it was the plot hole. It works forwards and backwards and blah, blah, blah. You know, writer's dodge. I mean, it's a cheap way out, but at the same time, I mean, it does technically work. And at the same time, we sort of knew we were going to be finishing off the critic, and I had this idea years ago, I want to say late high school, of a character who would meet the writer. He would meet the creator. In some versions, it was a she. And I had this idea, and I'll go more into it when we get closer to the end here. But I've always wanted to use this idea for something, but all I ever had was the ending. I tried putting other stories to it, just none of them ever seemed to match. And finally, this one seemed, well, is this one good enough? I mean, is this good? And I was thinking, well, this is a character I've done for like, you know, 4 to 5 years. I mean, it's, you got to give him a good send-off, and this was sort of the best send-off I could think of because we were now trying to give him a little bit more dimension. You know, we tried doing the Kikassia route and stuff, which went over great and a lot of people liked it, but if you want to evolve something, you have to do exactly that, evolve it. And the character has to have some remorse, some caring in there, you know, if he, as a character, is going to, you know, like I said, evolve. So we did a little bit of that with Suburbanites to see if we could get away with it. And people seemed to like it, and they enjoyed that. So we said, okay, well, maybe, you know, for the big send-off, maybe we can have sort of our dramatic moments here. Maybe this can work okay. And one of the funny things, actually, is that some of these scenes I actually did too serious when I first did them, and I reshot them because it was becoming more Doug acting dramatic and not the nostalgia critic doing what he would do. Because even the nostalgia critic acting serious is different than me acting serious. I mean, the critic is a character. There's a lot of me in it, but it's still a character. I like this talk with Matthew. I like opening up this way. I was actually debating whether or not to have the little captain's log in there because this originally explained what was going on. This gave you the backstory. But I liked it. I thought that was Rob's writing, and I really liked the way he put all those things. And for anyone who really was coming in fresh or something, I mean, there's no way you could miss what happened. I mean, I think we say it like 3 times in this opening, so nobody's confused. I like Matthew is the one, or Film Brain, I should say, is the one that the critic would actually confide in a little bit more. There's a few people he shares some things. Like, there's a scene later where Lindsay comes in and he shares a little bit, but even then, it's just like at the very end he only starts to kind of show it. Here, the critic feels there's nothing he needs to defend against with Film Brain because he just knows he'll agree with anything. I mean, even here, he's not, Film Brain isn't defying him or being mean to him. I mean, he's just pointing out sort of the obvious. So, and I like that. And the critic, because of that, can be, he can open up to him, but he can be very cruel to him, too. I usually find that with a lot of insecure people is that their closest friends, the people they depend the most on for love, they can be the nicest to and they can be the cruelest to, which is very fascinating. That is Sparkle, Sparkle, Sparkle. As I told him when we first shot that he would be known as. And that's actually Jim J. Resin. He worked his ass off on the sets and the props, and just one of the nicest, hardest working guys I know. And I'm so glad now we're being able to sort of utilize him again. Because it's like we had this great guy for a while, but our productions just weren't able, we didn't have the money to really sort of use him. So we started using him for Photoshop work on the NCs, which he did great on. And they were really fast and really great. And finally, when we got to these productions where we could do, you know, sort of these, you know, to get sets and props and stuff like that, I mean, not only did he come through, but I mean, he just, anytime I'd be like, hey, I got something else we may need here. If you can't do it, it's okay. He's like, no, no, I'll do it. I mean, he's just, like I said, one of the hardest working, nicest guys I know. That's my dad, by the way, making his second cameo. He was also the reporter in Suburban Nights. I remember originally it was going to be Holly in this role. She gets a role later as the reporter, and then visually she makes an appearance during when the executor is trying to bring Brad over to the dark side. I can't remember why we switched it. Originally it was written for a guy, but then I said, oh, this might be good for Holly to be sort of this judge or senator character here, and I can't remember why, but maybe my dad pestered me for a cameo. I can't remember a bigger role. Or maybe he was going to be the reporter, but I figured we already did that in last year, so maybe switch it up a bit. That's Parental Floss, by the way, doing that narration. These greens, the shots of Noah talking were actually done at his place for the green screen because we ran out of time. So we just said, can you shoot the stuff at your place? And he said, yeah. Is an editor's dream because he sends you an ungodly amount of takes, which is perfect because, I mean, if you have a person that just does one or two, it's like, well, he didn't deliver it how he wanted, how I wanted it, so he can send you, like, 10 or 11 takes of, like, just him going, ow! This is Jim Trokin, who is also a man of like a bajillion hats, as I said in the last commentary too. And I think he was really happy because people were genuinely sad when he died. Spoilers if you haven't seen this. Why would you listen to the commentary? I digress. People were genuinely sad when he died because they wanted to see more of him. They thought he was a good villain, which of course is exactly what you want. You want to leave him wanting more. And I was really happy, but he was really happy because I think he sort of felt like his character last year got really sort of dragged through the mud. Like, I guess some people didn't like the character. Which, I don't know, it was sort of a straightforward, surf and do character. And I don't know, I didn't see quite as many people hate him, but I think it was one of those days where, like, Twitter does this thing where, like, I don't know, like it picks one person for everyone to like suddenly go to or respond to or something like that. I don't know how Twitter works. And I guess he was that person the exact same day like the Suburban Nights premiered, so you got all these people saying, hey, your character sucks. But yeah, everyone really liked Prick. And Prick sort of came from the fact that we love Walter Peck from Ghostbusters, and we would always imitate Walter Peck, and Jim could seem to do the best Walter Peck. And so we decided, okay, we're just going to make him the villain, because we always wanted more Walter Peck in Ghostbusters. So here we got more of him. I'm glad we killed him off when we did, though, because I think if he was the main villain, you'd start to get tired of him. I think he has just the right amount. There's only so much of that, I'm not changing my mind, mentality can go. I think he goes at just the right point. And I think he's killed in just the right way. So I'm very pleased. These were all shot at their places. This beat here I sort of put together with the idea that, again, sometimes I do think of trailers. I was thinking this would be sort of a good beat to hear, and it actually matched this piece of music that you'll hear later in the end. And I thought it just sort of sounded threatening. It's lampooning Contact, of course, the sound she hears, but I thought it sounded pretty cool. I always find Paul's delivery grows on me more and more. He's one of those people where it's like, I didn't really use him much at first when I started writing parts. But actually there's just this delivery and this laid backness that really, I want to use him more and more, actually. Anytime I'm writing a scene, like, you can just give him a normal line and he'll just make it sound very charming and very likable. I mean, he's very, very good at that. That's another one of the props that J-Roz put together. I think it was J-Roz. Might have been Holly. No, I think it was J-Roz. Phelan effect. So some great dialogue here. The, Mom? This is great, Rob writing. Oh, I was talking about the writing. Rob did the first draft of the script, and it had a lot of really, really, really good stuff. I mean, like, the essential story, is sort of what you see here. I mean, we didn't change too much in terms of the story. We just sort of added things. Um, but there were things like this. Well, first of all, it was 300 pages long. You think this is long already? It's like this could have been even longer. Some of the characters didn't get, had like a line. I think the love triangle had like 2 lines in it, and that was it. And but the stuff that was good was unbelievably good. Like the stuff with like Rob loved writing the stuff with like the Executor and Brad and the whole Luke thing. I think he wrote a lot of the Turl stuff as well. I think he might have even written a lot of the Zod stuff that stayed in. So he really loved those characters. And he had this really, really good story, but I always had this thing where it's like, we both have this thing about, he's very much a story person, I'm very much a character person. You can't have just one. You need both to move it through. And despite the fact we can get a lot of arguments and stuff, I do know we're actually very, very good together in terms of writing, because I think we do offset each other. That's me holding the camera this whole time, by the way. Nobody was nobody was home this day, so I got like pretty much all the shots of me reacting or seeing something. I mean, anything where I'm the only one in shot was done later, again, to save time. And I think they were done in about like 2 days, the equivalent of about 2 days. I got some focusing advice from Ed to figure out how to make these look a little bit more cinematic, and part of it is the focus. And you just realize, I mean, if you don't set it to automatic where everything's in focus and you get it, we're just like, I don't know if this is a good shot. The ones before were a little better, but you can see that, the focus on the critic and the rest being blurry in the background, I mean, just adds so much. I'm trying to use it more and more now, because it really does look wonderful. Something else you'll notice in this version is that there's a few more, not a ton, but a few more lighting techniques. It's not in this scene, but in other scenes you'll see like, some lens flares. The opening credits are a touch different. And I'm usually against that stuff. I always call it Lucasing. But Rob really wanted to get this stuff in because this is always how he saw it. And every time I'd be like, no, come on, you're going too far. You're doing blah, blah, blah. He'd show it to me. I'd just be like, damn it, that's really good. And I couldn't... I couldn't argue because it did just look so friggin' good. So, again, getting back to the writing, that'll probably be what I constantly come back to in this commentary, just talking about the writing, is so there's this great story, and there's some great scenes. And that was, but there's definitely stuff where, like I said, some people didn't get many lines, and other things that should have gotten a little bit more focused didn't get much focus, or some things I felt didn't need that much focus, had too much focus. So we went back and forth a few times. The version of the script that's the most interesting, and maybe we'll put it online someday because it's the most interesting to read, is the first draft, because you can just see the differences, and you can see what stuck and you can see what didn't, It's even fun, too, because, I mean, if you look at it, you might be like, oh, hey, that was a good scene, that was a good whatever, but got cut out. Well, actually, and here's the other thing. I mean, I think very much just ideas and sort of tying them together with a story, especially for us, I feel that's what people want to see. But Rob's very much a story. Rob will come in and say, this doesn't tie into the story. This needs to do this. We need to do that. And he's right. It does offset it very well. And then there's times where, I always feel like there's too much explaining. There's too much, going into, this is what we need to do next. Here's the next scene. Here's the next thing we got to do. I'd say, let's have a scene where, they can rest for a bit and it's just some character development, or they're just chatting or whatever. And like I said, it really, really, really equals out. It can drive us nuts, but at the same time, when it comes together, I think it gels really, really nicely. That was a nice little distraction there for Lewis to look at something, so he doesn't have to look directly at Mecha-Kara, so Mecha-Kara can get his line out. That was a very nice addition there. Getting a little bit of Bennett in there again, just sort of giving hints at characters whenever you can, because there's a lot of people to write for, and I like writing for the character. I like writing for all the people, because I take it as a challenge. Like I said, I love characters, so anytime you can just, you're done with one character, you just go to another. And if you don't like that character, well, it's okay. There's another one coming up in a second you might like, and you just keep going from there. This scene was originally shot a little different. It was shot behind. We had this shot, but then we also had behind their shoulders, so you could see my reaction sort of going back and forth. But that was part of the footage that got, for whatever reason, did get imported into the computer. So I had to reshoot my reactions. In fact, that's actually my wife's hand that slaps me in the scene coming up here. So she did make it into the movie. Rob always does these penis jokes that I think are actually pretty funny, but he always says, it turned out nearly as good as I wanted them. No, it didn't work, And I think they're pretty funny. These backgrounds are done by Merobot. Very, very well. This whole section is actually pretty much Merobot's section, with the exception of the hologram. I think Noah did. But yeah, those backgrounds are all Merobot, and he did a wonderful job. There were people, some people had a problem that there was just too much quoting of other sci-fi movies and too much references to other films, and yeah, I'd be lying if I said I didn't really strongly feel the same, because, I think of films like, because I guess there's so many other films that have also been guilty of this too, like one that just pops to mind, top of my head, is like Hot Shots. I think was very similar to Top Gun. And I think that sort of serves as a distraction away from the humor when they do there. They make too many references. Or another good example, I could be overreading it, but I really do truly think that Spaceballs is possibly taking scenes from the Star Wars movies. And, when they do that, it just takes away from the essence of the character and the other comedy that they're trying to get across. But instead, it's like, oh, look, that guy looks like, Darth Vader. Ooh. Almost like they're satirizing something, but at the same time, you wouldn't expect us to do that because, we almost never reference movies in our career, or video games. Our profession just doesn't allow for that. So to do something that has, a lot of references to movies, even, I don't know, satirizing them, I think is really just uncalled for and doesn't really have a connection to us. So I can see how people can get really confused and really turned off by that. I'm such a dick. Hello. Lamar Prick connects to somebody, I forget who. It isn't just Peck. It's another person, a congressman that I think Rob was addressing, or senator. I can't remember that. Listen to his commentary. He'll probably say it. Look at that smile. What a great smile. That was always written in the script that'd be a finger trap. I always wanted something where the way the person was restrained was a finger trap. Now, this is something I wanted to do in Suburban Nights, where Mecha Kara actually inserts himself into the crew, and the crew is too stupid to realize that it's not Linkara. We were going to do it in Suburban Nights, but it just didn't feel right, especially with fantasy. And then when it sort of looked like we were going to go the sci-fi route, it started seeming like, well, okay, we can do this. And I think some people might have been thrown off a little bit that there wasn't that much Linkara in this as much as Mecha Kara, but I sort of felt Linkara's gone space so many times, he's done so many space adventures. I sort of felt, well, we've kind of seen that. Let's try something a little different. That's where the comedy of this comes from, is that you're taking characters that don't do space travel, don't do this kind of stuff, and you're throwing them in space. All they know about from space travel is in movies. So, you just compare that with their misunderstanding or sometimes even over-understanding of it, and go from there. This is one of those scenes where in the actual, when we were watching it, it seemed to slow things down a bit. And I think a lot of it is because I didn't get that many good angles. Again, it was a little bit of a rush. One of us had to be somewhere, I think, that night. And just schedules were just so insane by this point, particularly my schedule. And it's a good section. It works fine, but it's sort of originally it went from this scene to us looking at the monitor where Mati gives Spoonie the whatever the character, and it just seemed like it was a little too much of the critic. Brian says something, Doug goes, huh? And Brian explains. It just seemed like there's about 5 of those in a row. And so what we did is that we split up a little bit with Sci-Fi Guy's house being blown up, which was originally supposed to be saved for part 2. But like I said, it just seemed to flow a bit better if we moved it around and we placed it here. So editing can play a big part. This scene actually I think plays very well now. Rob also did the lighting effects for when Brian puts his fingers on my head here. Again, just to give it a little bit more something visually interesting to look at. I know I did want it in this room because after a while, I sort of thought the way it was going in my head that there was going to be too many dark scenes or there was going to be not enough color. So I wanted to keep it in this room. And actually, the scenes, the way they played out, actually did come out pretty colorful. So this wasn't totally necessary, but at the same time, I think it's... You can't go to the shadowy place with Rob's lighting anyway, so it actually works out pretty well. Brian said he wanted to do this Obi-Wan for his part, and it turns out we had, you know, a character that was supposed to be sort of very Obi-Wan-ish. It's sort of Obi-Wan and Spock's father and stuff like that from the Star Trek movies. So it made sense to sort of make him that. The one joke we couldn't get in, sadly, because we had to sort of keep him separate from the group because he was local, and we knew if we needed to bring him back or if time was tight, which it was, we could just shoot his scenes another day, which is what we ended up doing. So the one joke that sadly he had that was a great joke, we just couldn't work it in because of the way it worked, was he would go around, he'd be calling everybody Luke. Everybody was Luke. Luke, you must do this, Luke. Even though he'd be talking to, like, Hope or something like that. And then when he actually got to Luke Mockery, he'd be like, I'm sorry, your name escapes me. So that was pretty good. It was a good joke, just couldn't quite fit it in. Two people that were not in the first 2 parts really until they got beamed in, I thought should be because they were sort of the big names. One was Joe. I really wanted to bring him in early in the writing, and the other was Lindsay. I thought, really, these are sort of the big players, you know. I don't want to say even like big players, but I mean, we've certainly done a lot with them in the past, and it seemed kind of weird just not to address them, especially with Lindsay seeing how that was going to lead to the love triangle. So this whole meeting of the people, I think actually originally Hope might have been in the place of Joe in this scene. So Hope and Chad would actually have a little bit of a connection beforehand, before they start building the machine. But it wasn't much of a connection. Like I said, I wanted to get Joe in there. Angry Joe, not J.O. So we switched that around. And I think also bringing in Lindsay for the other scene it leads to good stuff, you know, setting up the love triangle with Todd and Allison, and then also doing the, I think it makes the scene with the computer, where the computer is, you know, going nuts on Spoonie. Originally that scene was just written so it was only going on that scene with Spoonie. It wasn't cutting back and forth between Nostalgia Critic and him. And I think having Mati communicate with the critic as well, yeah, sort of lets him know there is something going on with Mati and that he's alive and everything else, and it just creates that suspense. I think that's my favorite scene. I love that whole, everything from the Fly the Navigator reference to, you know, to sort of, what I kind of call the Transformers scene, because it reminds me a lot of when, gonna sound so nerdy, when the Decepticons were sneaking into the computers and they were getting all the information they needed in the first movie. In fact, that was the theme that was always playing in my head when that scene happened, sort of that Decepticon theme. That's oh no, see no, oh no, gibberish. So that worked out very well. Yeah, that cut up there really helped a lot. Brian really wanted to keep this Hawaiian shirt covered, which is probably a good idea because people just sort of associate that, you know, he's Obi-Wan, and then suddenly there's just a Hawaiian shirt, which seems very in keeping with him. Rob also did a real good job going in. You know, I had music set to all of this, but some of it I wasn't married to, and he wasn't married to either. So he would go in and sort of switch it up a bit, and like he sort of turned that Wagner theme. Anything that's Wagner is usually Rob. I love Wagner too, so I have no problem with it. But anytime you hear that Wagner theme when sort of talking about the plot, it was very very clever because it sounds like the Luke theme from the Star Wars movies. If actually Mike Machad gave a call, he's just like, you know, yeah, everything was really good. You might want to take out that Star Wars music though when we go to DVD. We might have some copyright issues and stuff. And we're like, no, no, that's just Wagner. No, no, we didn't steal from Star Wars. John Williams stole from Wagner. Let's get it right. This originally, how did this work originally? I think it was originally Brad and Bennett, and they were the only two here. But then when we were gonna do this subplot with Luke wanting to learn from, you know, the Z grade reviewer and stuff like that, and Luke and Brad had to have a connection, it made sense to bring him in as well. Um, but it was still smart to have Bennett in there too because he was gonna have a big part in the end. He was gonna essentially sort of save the day. Uh, you know, from Matisse. So if we could build up that there was some kind of connection with Spoonie, or just he has some knowledge of what's going on, you know, even if it's just in the most minor way, you know, it will pay off. Now, this is something I never thought about. This some people were saying that since it's Mati and Spoonie's mind, you know, sort of both coexisting, that this is Mati answering the questions. I never thought of that. I always just assumed it was Spoonie. But now that I think about it, yeah, this actually can work both ways. So I will not give you a clear answer of who it is, but obviously that's the way we were writing it. But you can still take it however you want. That part where Brad goes, Spoonie, were you sexually attracted? Both Rob and I had the exact same idea. Again, this helps from being brothers. We both knew the way he should deliver it. And Rob wasn't even up here that day. And Brad says line once. I said, no, no, Brad, say it like how Bill Murray said it in the beginning of Ghostbusters when he was interviewing the secretary, when he was asking her what was going on. And he said exactly like that. And Rob said, you know, when I wrote that, I wanted to say it just like I said. I know, we both had the exact same thoughts. So that's the funny thing about being brothers when you're writing, is that you both have you have different focuses and you have different ways of going about it, but you will still ultimately have the same goal. And it is creepy. Don't watch something with us because we will shout out the exact same jokes. It's actually sort of terrifying. Funny story here. There's the people doing a lot of the camera work and sound work. I'll talk about them in a minute. They deserve to be talked about, but uh, doing the work. They also did a lot of the behind the scenes footage and featurettes and stuff like that. And one of them, they were getting Todd's interview for behind the scenes, and they got the wrong file. And they got the file where they grabbed it, and it was just the one of Todd saying, "I swear to God, if you call me again, I'm getting a restraining order." And they were just like, "What do we do? What do we do?" It was just the footage for this. So that's pretty funny. There are two scenes that had to be. We actually had to fly people back in to reshoot. One was this scene, which actually what we had the footage of Lindsay and I talking, but we didn't have her entrance, and we didn't have her with me when we were doing the when we were typing on the computer. So I could technically work around that. It just wouldn't be as good, you know. And I asked her, I said, you know, is this something you can do? Would you be up for flying out here? You're not required to by any means, you know, but, you know, if you can, it'd be great, but you're not required to. And she said, yeah, absolutely. So we just shot this in a day real quick. Now, that was the one that didn't have to be reshot, but Chad, there's a scene where he's talking with Hope, talking about the Dream Machine, essentially. And that footage got lost in importing. I don't know how. I mean, it's one of those things with just something glitched, something, you know, some footage got shot. I mean, thankfully, most of it could be reshot, but that was the one that absolutely had to be redone. And he came in, of course, as well, and actually helped find locations for when we were going to shoot the Judge Dredd scene. And the dialogue I have here actually was reshot. Originally, it was much more dramatic, and there's definitely some drama there at the end. But originally, I mean, he was just already in that mode you see at the end where he's sort of thinking to himself, and I just don't know what's going on. I can't see, blah blah blah. And I'm thinking to myself, nah, he wouldn't. It's still the critic. He would still be sort of annoyed and angry and stuff, and only at the end, especially around the nostalgia chick, who, I sort of feel like, he can let loose on Film Brain because he knows he won't fight back. Nostalgia Chick, he knows she'll fight back, so he doesn't, play nice or super mean or anything like that. He just sort of keeps protected, which is why it's so great at the end when he finally does start to show a little bit of, his real self and the emotion there. But of course, she just wants to make a prank call. She's concerned her own selfish needs. Let's talk about We Shot First. We Shot First is a production team that loved our stuff. They're from Indiana, and they just emailed us and said, we love to do something with you guys. We see the anniversary is coming up. We're just huge fans. You're what got us into this stuff. We just love to do something. We'll drive out there. We have camera equipment. We're very industrious. We can make stuff. We just love to be a part of it. And we said, well, okay, maybe we can get something out of them, and we gave the okay. And these were the people, I mean, I think where everybody at some point, sort of complained about something or was having a hard time with something. These people never complain. They actually even told me, they said this was like their vacation. Because they're doing what they love. I mean, this is stuff that they just love and adore doing. And, I mean, like they said, oh, by the end of the day, we passed out. I mean, we were stone cold. We were so exhausted. Our body parts hurt and everything because we were holding microphones and cameras and lights and stuff. But they said, this is what they've been training for all their life. This is what they've always wanted to do. And they never forgot the fact that, that they're essentially doing what they love. So, I mean, just so thankful to those three and just how optimistic they are, what a good sense of humor they have, how hard working they were. I mean, just so in debt to those bands. We are bringing them on board. We are doing more stuff with them in the future. So just some of the most chipper, hardest working people I've ever met. So very, very cool. That hair, by the way, her hair is actually, those are extensions. Because she cut her hair after we shot the other scenes. But she did find some extensions and nobody could tell. This is the scene, this and I think Distraction were the two scenes I was looking the most forward to editing. And yeah, like I said, this is still my favorite scene. I just think, I love, it's kind of funny, it's kind of suspenseful, it's kind of goofy, it's kind of serious. It's just everything. I mean, it's everything I could want in a scene. It just plays out so perfect. Now, the original scene didn't have, something else that Rob did a lot of was Foley work. A lot of these sound effects that you'll hear, sort of the computers going, or all that stuff. He put a lot of time and effort into. And again, that is sort of a big difference between us. I'm very much sort of the big picture. He's very much the little details. Again, you need both. And they both really, really played a big part. And the little computer sound effects actually really did add a lot to this scene. It's good to have that different outlook because, I mean, when you're watching it, I mean, you're just seeing it, how do I put it? Like, you're watching it like you can already sort of hear the sound effects. So it's like, what do you mean it needs sound effects? You sort of think in your mind it's already there. Like, the music's the sound effects and blah, blah, blah. But he actually did a real good job. Actually, no, both him and Jim worked on this scene, if I'm right, Jim Trokin. They came in, they spent like a day just doing it. Oh, and they also did a lot of these screen images, too. I had some images up there, but they weren't quite what Rob was looking for, which I didn't care, essentially, what went up there. But something else they did that was a very clever change was that they made everything on my screen green and everything on the other screen orange, which was great because you're constantly cutting back and forth. And you can just automatically make that connection that, oh, when it's the green screen, it's at Nostalgia Critic's place. When it's the orange screen, it's at the scientist's place. music's wonderful, again, from musicloops.com, just wonderful. What we did with Noah's twitching is that I said we'll go up to 10. We'll start with, 1. He'll start to twitch a little bit and get that for a few seconds. I'll go 2. He'll start to twitch a little more. 3, and he'll twitch more and more, and we just did that up to 10, so we could, so I had plenty to work with here. One of my favorite shots here. Oh, I love that shot. There's something almost legitimately threatening about it. Here's a running joke that just sort of happened, I think, from Kick-Assy, is that I would always hide behind the nostalgia chick, which doesn't even make much sense because she's like half my height. So I usually have to duck down behind her. Now here's something I should have added on that first explosion, at least. When it blew up, I should have had a little smoke or a little something when they jumped back. I didn't pick that up, and I should have, because it does sound like it just looks like they're watching a screensaver of the screen exploding. This whole thing about the whole obviously satirizing SOPA and everything, as some people could say, is kind of dated. I disagree, because I think there's always going to be people who are going to try and take this stuff down and see stuff that clearly isn't a threat as a threat, and read numbers that don't exist into areas where they feel it should exist to make their point stronger. True, we're satirizing specifically SOPA, but I mean, this idea that people are going to try to take this away and take away what people are doing on the internet, I mean, it's always going to happen. It's already started. This is obviously referencing the Twinkie from the Ghostbusters. What about the Twinkie? Watching, again, one of the reasons I love working with these people, watch the people who aren't talking. Watch their reactions. Like when Nella was saying, whatever, 2% of their brains or whatever, you see Lisa actually doing the math on her fingers. It's like, that's wonderful. I love that stuff. There's a scene coming up here where... That's great. I love Benna's reaction there. That's wonderful. Now, you see the door is open there. It's going to be closed. The reason for that is it is a mistake. It's because originally the scene where Sci-Fi Guy's house gets blown up came in between. So it gave time. It was supposed to be like, this is a different time. But when we edited it, it turned out it was better there. So if you're paying attention to the door, we're probably not doing our job properly. It's fascinating. We actually wrote this character to imitate Walter Peck, and yet he doesn't actually reference any Peck lines until this point. Until, I think a scene away from his death. Jim also has an advantage. He's very tall, so he can already look very intimidating. I try to reference this as much as I could to the original Ghostbusters. Right down to the point where people are saying, like, don't you want to have music build up right before the thing goes off and the alarm goes off? I'm like, no, there wasn't in Ghostbusters. We shouldn't have it here. There was a line I cut out. I thought it just made the scene go a touch too long. Maybe I should have kept it in. I'm not sure where... We reference Ghostbusters so much that Prick actually starts quoting the exact dialogue, to Cinema Snob, I give you your chance, wise ass. Well, now it is my turn, blah, 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 blah. And Cinema Snob just says, dude, I just met you. It was a funny line. I just felt I was really concerned about this the first two parts, because I thought it may be too much explaining. It equaled out okay, but in the original draft, they don't go into space until about an hour and a half in. And so there was just a drastic need to cut out as much as possible and just get to what needs to be said, just get to the point. And sometimes that resulted in cutting a line that probably should have stayed. Actually, I think that line would have been pretty funny. Now, these shots, Jim and Rob went out, I want to say while I was on my honeymoon. Or at a con or something, and they got these shots of the city. I think Jim specifically wanted to go with because he was going to do these effects. These effects are done by Jim Trokin. So he was not only the effects supervisor, he was also doing some of the effects, and these look wonderful. And a lot of these shots look so good. I mean, not even taking the effects out, which also look wonderful. Just these shots in general just look fantastic. You know, something both Rob and I love getting shots of is the city and the forest. You can keep us out there forever. We'll never run out of angles. This is something I just sort of went around. I asked people to do whatchamacallit. You know, it just stuff started changing around and so forth. I tried to give him different angles and different ideas and stuff like that. I had Rap Critic brushing his teeth because the funniest thing I ever saw from him was a cameo of, I think it was like Lindsay's What Women Want or something like that. Or there's a longer scene of that with Suede in the deleted scenes. Check it out. But with Rap Critic, there's just this great scene where it was like instead of what women want, it was what men want, and you have them like, you know, hearing their minds. It's mostly stuff like ass, 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 ass. And I guess he just did this scene where, like, he made up, like, just suddenly this revelation of, like, his soul and his, you know, what it means to be black and his race and stuff like that. And it goes right back to ass, ass, ass. And it was just so funny. I figured, well, there's already one funny bit with him brushing his teeth. Might as well try to go for two. This effectively was me, I don't want to say satirizing, it was much more inspired by, again, you're going to laugh, but the first Transformers movie. I really love it when they first come to Earth and they get assembled and the music and the build-up and everything. I just really love that. So this scene is kind of similar to that. Even if you don't like the first Transformers movie, which is very understandable, I say there's still some good stuff in there that you can rip from. Now to that shot of Lewis turning there with the smile, he actually, when he did his shot, I think he just did like he was looking like, what the hell? But then there was a second where he turned to look the other way and he had that smirk and then it went away. I don't think it was for a take. I'm not sure what it was for, but I was just like, oh, it looks so good. Let's get that in there. That's why it sort of slowed down there. Now, if you look to the left of Phelan's shoulder, you'll see a little bit of a brown jacket, and that was actually Bennett, which I realized when I was editing, wait, he's not there yet. So I took him out. I cropped that down. Because a lot of the camera angles, we couldn't get quite what I was looking for, again, because of time. What we ended up doing, again, Ed gave some advice where this was shot on 1080. He said put it in a 720 project. So that way the picture will be too big for it. But you can always zoom in and you can crop a lot easier and stuff like that. He said unless you're going to Blu-ray, you won't tell a difference. You know, it'll still be fine for DVD. So that's what I did. It really helped a lot. There's a lot of good pannings and, you know, close-ups and stuff like that you can get with that technique, and I abused it like hell, but thankfully I don't think anyone noticed too much. I wonder if anyone's ever noticed that the calendar keeps changing, the month keeps changing in the background. This is just in my laundry room. The music you hear here, I forget who asked. Somebody asked, is that, okay, what's the real music you're going to put in there? I'm just like, no, that's the real music. Just wah, 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 wah. I just love that. I love the way they did those turns, too. If you really watch that scene, it's pretty funny, just the way they turn and look at each other and then sort of wobble off. I love it. I laughed like a bastard when I read that scene in the first draft. I was just like, oh my god, no, that's in And Rob was really worried because he was like, oh, is that too much of a callback to the first one? And stuff. I was just like, no, that's so funny. And that is one of the biggest laughs that everyone says they get his Hope's introduction there. Again, this is a scene where obviously this is Critic, but then when he starts confessing, again, he starts to get a little bit more, he starts to open up a touch. It's still the Critic, though, but he's showing an era he's not used to showing. And that's ultimately what wins the people over. I kind of like the fact they actually do go in because it's kind of the right thing to do, and it does sort of show how far they've gotten. I mean, granted, there's selfish needs too that they say, but I mean, you saw they weren't with him at all. You know, I mean, they're pointing out all the faults and everything until he actually does sort of plead with them. You know, please, I'm begging you here. You notice in the first half of these shots, Lindsay isn't in it because actually she wasn't feeling well that morning. And I said, okay, we can shoot around you and stuff. And so we always just sort of, you know, because everyone else is so tall, you know, we sort of said, you know, okay, she's in there. No, she's back there. Nobody ever notices. Look at Chad there. Watch the people in the background. That's where half the Look at Nikki there. That was great. That's where half the comedy comes from, is just the people in the background. Now, they actually did do this in one take, Brad and Bennett. It cuts back to me because it was just a little bit too much of that one shot. And people probably think that, you know, they had to take a break or something. But no, they actually got it perfect. I just cut back because the shot was looking it was on them for a little too long. My favorite bit is the little look that Luke gives here. Oh. Love it. I love the idea of this beaming that just somehow he had a device that would actually beam everybody there. Yeah, somehow he doesn't get everybody, but it is Insano's beaming device, so maybe it just doesn't work as well. Now that whiteboard of doom in the background, it was actually already in that basement. That's not my basement, that's James's basement. The same guy who he gets his heart ripped out in Suburban Nights. He has a cameo in this too. And both him and his wife were extremely kind to let us use this house, because I mean it has like, God, 1, 2, 3, 4, about 5 locations inside of it, because it's a big house and they just remodeled it. But the one catch was that we all had to walk around without our shoes on. So that's why you never see any shots of anybody's feet. Actually, Zod was in his socks, and Turtle was in his socks. All the guards were in their socks. So there's never any shots of the shoes. This projector effect was done by Noah, as was the hologram effects. Now here was the big issue, actually, when we were writing, is that I think this was about the 3rd or 4th draft. And I was telling Rob, I think it's close, but I don't know. There's just something missing. And I was saying it was the whole script. When actually I started reading it again, it was essentially fine. And I said, actually, no, this really flows nice and it works well. I said, but what am I missing here? And I realized is that when they're all talking to Insano, the critic was not in the scene. He couldn't be there. And that essentially had to be what the critic was going after. Once he hears what the plot hole is, once he hears the possibilities of it, that has to be what draws him to it. Because in my version that I wanted, is that the mystery was you don't know what it is that's causing all this stuff. It's only revealed near the end that it's a plot hole. Because I know I want some mystery going through. Something has to keep people coming back so that they want to see what's going to happen. And originally I wanted, what was it that was causing all this? And Rob really disagreed, and he was right. You know, it was right to have the plot hole put out there this early. But there had to be some other mystery, and Rob always said, well, the mystery is what's inside the plot hole. But we never build up, in the final draft, or the second to final draft, we never built up that the critic wants to go inside the plot hole and that it's calling, you know, that he feels his destiny is in there. So once we just had this one scene where just the critic reacts to Insano saying, you know, it's a plot hole, any outcome is possible, anything that was impossible before is possible now. That sealed it. Suddenly, the critic has purpose. Suddenly, there's a suspense. Suddenly, you know, he has something to work towards. And that just turned everything, like, you know, on its head. I mean, that just suddenly made everything come together. So it is funny if you think like, maybe the pacing isn't there or something else is wrong or the writing isn't quite right. A lot of times, sometimes it's just missing that element. A lot of times, sometimes I like that. But it can just be missing one element. There's a Lilo and Stitch joke in there, by the way, if you look real close. You have to watch it again. Um, So keep that in mind when you're writing sometimes. Sometimes it's not, sometimes the rest of the script is fine. It can just be missing one element. It can even be a small element, but just changes the course of the whole movie. It's fun getting these shots. I love getting shots like these. Just of the equipment and the constant movement and stuff. Both my brother and I love getting these shots. Just sort of the tilting and the tracking in and stuff like that. To a point where when they actually had a dolly, the We Shot First people actually had a dolly that they put together themselves. Like I said, very industrious. There was sort of this sadness for me anyway, just like, oh, but I used to get kind of the dolly shots and blah, blah, blah. But it's like, there's no contest. It looked so much better. Speaking of J. Roz's Photoshop work, he also put that together. Oh, here's something to address. When, in the first draft, we always had it that some of the characters were going to be whatever assimilated or sort of reference sci-fi movies and stuff like that, but it was only about half of them, and I felt like the other half were going to sort of be left out. So originally we had this thing in the first draft where I tell everybody, okay, everybody meet here tomorrow and dress for space. And I come down like in an astronaut outfit, like somebody would dress for, being an astronaut, for going into space, and everyone else comes in as a movie or video game character. I say, what the hell? I said dress for space. And they're like, all we know is movies. So that was the original setup, but both Rob and I sort of agree it just wasn't, it was a little too cheap of a gimmick. It was a little too fast. And why would only half of them be dressed up and not the other half, who are going to fall into their roles? And Rob was really pushing. It's like, I don't want everybody to be a character at some point. I was pushing, yes, we do. Somebody has to have, everyone has to have their moment. Everyone has to have a purpose. Everyone has to, have something to do. And he didn't see the necessity. We kept going back and forth. And he says, well, I don't like this, reasoning that he just says dress for space. I'm like, I don't either, but what do you want me to do? Do you want to have everybody somehow forcibly or logically fall into their roles, their character roles? I started to think about it. I was like, oh, wait, maybe Hope can get zapped and that messes with her brain, so she's suddenly a genius like Ed. Well, wait, maybe Paul, since he's, sort of the officer there, he can put on Spock ears. Well, wait, maybe Mickey, when distracting these two, can dress up like a Men in Black. And it suddenly started to fall together. And I really like that route so much more than like what we do with Suburban Nights, because we already did in Suburban Nights. The awesome Ed Glazer right there was very patient when I didn't understand something on set or had to be shown something. Because I did have, some film background in the past, but I mean, it's like years ago, and I don't put it too much in practice because essentially it's just me at a desk, and I can't do a bunch of the other stuff. So things like the 180 rule, I believe are very important, and you should keep it going, but it's hard for me to comprehend like where the camera should go. I always try to visualize that line you're not supposed to cross. And that's always tough on a shoot like this because it's like, on the one hand, I am learning and I do want to see, what it is I'm not getting so I don't make that mistake again. But the downside is that when you only have 6 days to do this, it can get pretty tight. So, and that can get very frustrating. So it's, again, he was very, very patient through a lot of that. Everyone was, very hardworking and very patient on this. Ed's actually I'm finding out more and more too, he's actually a pretty damn good actor. I don't know if the Cinema Snob movie's going to be out by the time this comes out, but he has a bit in there, and it's just, every time he's on screen, your eye goes to him. It's just like a bit part, but it's like, you're just watching him the whole time. I want known I did not write the short scene. I think we made so many short jokes in the past. I said, okay, we should stop. And then Rob was like, well, if we're going to end them, we got to go out on the best one ever. We had to have Mickey get his ultimate revenge and stuff. And it is funny as hell. I think this whole idea of sort of making these, sort of these video game references and stuff, I think that was mostly Rob. I didn't fight him on at all, because I think they're hilarious. There's some of those great effects. Something Jim Trogan was very insistent on. He really wanted to look like the actual house, but I never showed the actual house all the way through, all the way far away. So it always sort of felt like, just a normal house. It doesn't matter. So I just sort of drew this very basic square or rectangle. And Jim was just like, let me mess with this. And he actually got, like, the levels and the basement and the upstairs. And I mean, he got essentially what the house looks like. Which probably made it easier because I could just take pictures of it then just to show the animators. Great reaction there. I love this reaction. Love it. Great cut there. Great edit. That was an improv there. You can always get improvised lines from Noah too. He'll always, he'll give you some of the regular take and then give you one or two little improvs. I mean, even ones that's like clearly we're not gonna use, but it's just like, maybe you can use the first couple seconds of it or something. Animation coming up here was by Marrowbot. He does it very well. Actually, no. Here's the funny thing. I told him, I said, okay, I just need a still of a door on the ship, and what's behind the door, which could be sort of like this bright white background or something, and I can just animate real fast. It wouldn't look for anything spectacular. And he was just like, here, do you have the footage of Zod walking in? I'm like, yeah. He's like, get that to me real fast. And okay, I got it to him. The next day, he sends me this. It looks unbelievable. I was just like, oh, well, okay. And it pretty much cost the same as putting the backgrounds together. He didn't do like any extra charge for the animation or anything, so it turned out great. Where in Suburban Nights, it was very much, it was very much two teams, which everyone agreed was a good idea. Here was very much duos. A lot of people were sort of teamed up together. You sort of had Luke and Brad, and you had Chad and Hope. The love triangle is getting three of them together. You sort of have Film Brain and Critic a good chunk of the time too, and so I mean that seemed to be a good route to go. So that you can see that there are connections made, and there are sort of relationships made. Another one of my favorite scenes here. This is one of those where both Rob and I were just exactly on the same page. When I showed it to him, he's like, oh my god, that's exactly how I imagined this scene going. I was like, yeah, me too. I think we both sort of had the same thought here. Chad is very good. Keep an eye on Hope. I actually fell in love with her acting in this. Her acting as Ed, of course, is great. You're either, now granted, you're either gonna love it or hate it, depending on whether or not you love or hate Ed. But if even people were just like, I don't like the whole Ed thing, blah blah blah, acknowledge she did it very, very well. But like, look at these reactions. Like the one reaction here, love that reaction. That's a great reaction. I keep coming back to her because she kept giving so many good shots and so many good reactions. I mean, just look at her throughout this whole scene. Look at that. Those are so good. Which is not to say Chad isn't good too. He's very, very good. But I mean, it's just every one of those takes. I mean, like I said, I kept cutting back because I just loved those subtle little, raising the eyebrow or moving of the eyes or the lips or something. I mean, it's just it. Look at it. Every one was phenomenal, and I was just like, wow. Here's the scene. This is a scene that didn't come alive. It didn't come alive until the music was put in. And Rob went in and sort of found these public domain tracks that we have on standby, and again, it's like alone it played okay, but with the music it just totally popped and really really came to life. There's other scenes where music was tried to be put in, which always kind of sucks because, like, if you're just like, I'm sorry, I just don't feel it goes there. I mean, it could be like hours that, Rob or somebody, usually Rob, worked on it trying to get this music right. If I just feel it didn't work, it just didn't work. So that always kind of sucks. But then you get scenes like this, I mean, where it's wonderful. And like I say, it really moves it along so much nicer. Music oftentimes can make a scene go much faster if you put it in. But if you put in too much, then it always seems like the movie's always moving. And you shouldn't have that. You should have moments where you can slow down and you can accept character and you can just see them be themselves. Because if you don't have moments where a character is just a character, why are you following them? If they're doing nothing but saying story and exposition and stuff like that, there's no reason, there's no way you can get an attachment to them. So it's always good to have scenes where they can just be themselves, or they can just emote, or they can do whatever. And really the goal is to do both. Like this scene, you're showing character, but you're also explaining some story that's going to come in later. Where he says, one day he may want to quit. And you play that into a movie he's going to want to make later, establishing that he wants to make movies and so on and so forth. So you just go from there. Now Chad's visor here was supposed to be Geordi, but everyone sort of gets Cyclops, and just for argument, yeah, I'll say Cyclops. It was supposed to be Geordi, but the way he came in and just with the jacket and the way he has his hair and everything, I mean, he looks more like Cyclops, so we'll just go with that. Now, Ed, as in Ed from Cowboy Bebop, is one of my all-time favorite characters. But I understand when people say they can't stand her, that they find her annoying and stuff, because, I mean, I can't understand, I can't say, oh, I don't know where that comes from. I do, I get it. But I just find it so likable. I find characters who are just so in their own world and don't give a shit about anyone else. So entertaining and so fascinating. So this was great fun to write. And Hope, of course, does it great. Like I say, even the people that don't like the Ed character are like, oh, but she does it great. It's like she totally has it nailed down. The one thing I wish I did, I didn't realize I didn't do, or I didn't realize as director, is that she isn't wearing the goggles before she gets zapped there. And she should have been. That's the one part I was just like, biting my fist on. We were never in the same room here. That's his green screen and my green screen. Great delivery. The reason for shooting in houses is pretty obvious, because our budgets, wouldn't allow too much more. And I didn't want the whole thing on green screen because, again, I started going the Lucas route and you can sort of sense it. The only time to do it is if you can make it really, really stylized, like something like Sin City, maybe. You know, and just sort of put it in its own world, which again we didn't have the budget for it. I don't know if it necessarily matched what we're trying to do either, the story we're trying to tell. On top of it, I think it's just funny. I think just these two, you know, sort of strange, menacing looking men going around in this house, the suburban house, and then they start to act like a married couple. It almost starts to, you know, rub off on them, you know, talking about how nice the plant in the corner looks and stuff. The plant in the corner, by the way, has its own Facebook. Look it up, it really does. Here's your little Dune reference here. We actually make a couple. We make this and then the lovely scene with Noah Speedo. That was a thing of beauty. Now, something funny. I don't use Twitter. I despise Twitter. Actually, I think it's the I don't like Twitter. Anyway, so at the end here, where he says, "I'm totally tweeting that," and people are saying like, "Oh, and say / Zod.com or what?" I still don't know what it is, but just every time I do the line, I'd always get it wrong because I have no idea what the hell, how the hell it works. So yeah, that's why that was one of the scenes that was cut right after that. Our never knows Justin with his his thumb in his mouth there. It's great. There's a big debate about whether or not we should take the time to actually make the set blue, because originally they were saying, "Oh, we can do it in post. We can change the color later." I really wanted it blue on the set. I mean, if it wasn't looking good, we'd just do it in post. But I really, I think there's something about when the color is actually there. Anytime something is actually there and you can do it, you know, I'm always for try to do it. You know, if it doesn't work, you go to post anyway. It's what you were gonna do, but try to see if you can get the real color. And I think it really does show. It looks less artificial when you have the actual blue color in there. Now here's something interesting. Rob wrote some of these scenes more as comedy. He sort of imagined them being said with more sense of humor. I imagine them being said more dramatic. So Rob was actually pretty surprised when he saw these scenes. It just sort of went, "Oh, okay." Like, this wasn't at all what I had in mind, but it works. So it's nice actually adding a little drama to us, you know, a touch of weight to something that's essentially silly, but it's always okay because we go to something incredibly silly later. We always end it on a punchline. My theory is that you can get away with just about any dramatic material as long as you have a punchline at the end. I think I wrote this scene and Rob wrote the Brad and Luke scene. Most anything with a love triangle was me, then anything with Brad and Luke was usually Rob. I hate love triangles in dramas. I love them in comedies. I think they're hilarious in comedies if they're played for laughs. You know, this is obviously played for laughs. Yeah, The Office, you know, definitely abused it, but they were trying to do it all serious and stuff. I think this is all very funny. Competition I find very funny, and jealousy I find very funny. That's one of the reasons Toy Story works so well. Now, originally I had this scene. Well, no. Rob wrote this scene pretty much as is. And then I wrote it at another moment where they were just like at their control panels or something like that. And Rob really insisted putting it sort of back here. And he was right because it broke things up a little bit. It sort of broke up, you know, you had a different color scheme, you had a different sort of moment going on and stuff. But then he's yelling at me like, you know, well, why'd you make them look so gay and stuff? I'm like, well, they're sleeping together. What do you expect? Which again, I mean, I think it works okay because you make the Takei joke at the end. Again, as long as you reference it, it's all right. Though I did find out some scenes, you know, in this movie actually, it's like, oh, I should have referenced that because people didn't know that was supposed to be funny or a joke or something like that. Um, Particularly the scene where like the stormtroopers are firing at the critic's firing, and they never hit each other, even though there's nothing blocking them. The original music here was, for lack of a better term, a little gayer, which wasn't entirely the intention. So Rob went and he switched down, sort of. He put in this piece. It's essentially this piece, but it was in other parts, so there's a little bit more. Sort of the music was doing a little too much, distracting from the dialogue. So we both sort of tinkered with it and got this very nice middle. Where it's not just a drone, but it's also not too much that's distracting from what they're saying. This book cover, by the way, Rob made. Based on a book we really do have, his biography of To the Stars. I always wanted James Rolfe as this Gort character. We weren't entirely sure if we could get him, but that was always the idea. Rob wanted him really early. He wanted to start off actually with James Rolfe very early. He was going to sort of be Brian's part early on. I wanted to save him. Especially because, I mean, we should just have that scene at the end. I just love that it's sort of ending with the critic and nerd, one of the earliest things that we've ever done. That is actually Oreo. That's grounded up Oreo, not coffee. I love shots like this where someone has to be hiding there the whole time and then suddenly they appear and you never cut to anything else, so you know they have to have been down there the whole time. I love this little shove here. Boom. Love it. We shot this scene, and some of the people were concerned that it was a little, for lack of a better term, or hell, the term that was being used was rapey. And I just saw it very much as, oh, what, it's just being assimilated, like the Borg, being turned into robots. Heck, that's stuff from, like, kids' cartoons, being turned into a robot and stuff like that. The way it was originally shot, though, I was sort of looking at it, and I told him, I said, I'll see in editing. If it doesn't look good in editing, I'll change it, because I can be totally wrong about stuff. I never know until like I said, I see it cut together. And I was looking at the original scene had Lewis holding up sort of that just the drill part, not the actual, like, the trigger or the gun part or anything, just the drill. It was supposed to be coming out of his wrist, sort of like what you see later when Lindsay holds up, she's about to assimilate Todd. It was supposed to be like that, but the way it came up, it looked like he was holding it. And it looked like it wasn't connected with him. It looked like it was going towards the camera. I was just like, oh, and I remember showing Rob, and I was just like, what do you think? And he's like, we're both pretty uncomfortable with it, so we finally went and sort of redid it. And so now it's, and then later, oddly enough, you have the scene where Matthew hears him outside, and that was the big reason why it couldn't sound, it couldn't look like that at all, is that Matthew had to think they were both, that both sides were agreeing to do it. It wasn't one was, like having his way with the other or something like that, or else he would go tell somebody. So the way the scene ultimately came out, because then I was putting in the sound effects, which I thought were funny, but again, sort of my naivete wasn't putting together that, hey, this is sounding even worse. Because originally, like, glass was breaking, and you hear pounding sounds, and ooh, ee, ah, oh, 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 and stuff like that. And Rob was like, I think that's sounding even worse. So I finally just said, you know what? Do what you can, because I don't think I'm qualified to do this, because I think I'm just too naive about it. And so ultimately what came out was that, and I actually wasn't that satisfied. I was going to cut it out, but at the time, it's the only one that was uploaded and to Blip. And I actually didn't, I wasn't at the house to upload the other one because I was actually in the process of buying another house. So that sounds pretty snobbish. I was in the process of buying another house, but obviously when you're in the middle of that, it goes longer than it needs to. You don't want to interrupt that. So it's kind of like, you know what, the scene doesn't destroy anything, and I don't think it's controversial anymore, just play it. So some people get a laugh out of it. I think it's a little bit of a throwaway joke, but it works okay. We try to work in every once in a while when you see Turl, the shot would be a little slanted. You can't do it for all the shots because it would just get a little too annoying. We actually even had an idea that at some point Zod would turn the camera back to its normal setting, but it was one of those things that was just sort of, the joke was kind of getting lost, so we didn't go too far with it. It's more fun just seeing him act like a married couple. Actually, I think the highest compliment we got is that they're very much like Shredder and Krang. I take that very much as a compliment. And that actually is Jupiter playing the music. Actually, that clip there, originally there was a clip of Jupiter and Europa there and the plot hole, but there was a problem. The one that was in focus was actually Jupiter and not Europa. So when we saw that, it's like, actually, the Star Trek's completely right, and Mars Girl is wrong. So we had to do a zoom in on the moon there. One regret I do kind of have. I mean, granted, for as many characters that we have to put in here and having, jokes and story arcs and stuff like that, the one I do kind of regret is that I should have given, like, I don't mind starting the whole psychic thing here. I should have given Bennett at least one more scene with the psychic stuff, and that he wants to be like a good counselor or something like that. I should have done one more thing, I think. But it still plays out well. I mean, when he comes in and he says my psychic powers, I mean, people know what he's talking about. Phelan, again, always going to give a delivery unlike... You have two people here who I never know how they're going to say their lines. Both Paul and Phelan always sort of have their own unique way, which usually works out for the best because, again, you're saying it in a way that nobody else would say it, so it's more unpredictable. And they both do have a good idea of, comic timing, so... So no problem at all. There's all those lens flares that Rob is so proud of. I think, again, just pure naivete. I made this very short because right after it, Noah shouts, "Rape!" I just miss, my childlike mind just misses that stuff too much. Which again is good to have other people around to point out. This is looking like this. This is James's basement here. I love that. What the hell is he doing? I had some, not much, but I had some concern that there'd be a little too much cutting back and forth between so many various scenes and characters and stuff. But actually, I find that when it's all put together, it actually really helps in keeping it just sort of very fresh. It's, the one thing about Suburban Nights is that you're always going to cut back and forth between these two groups. And then when Malachi gets thrown there, it spices it up a bit because you have another scene to constantly cut back to. But actually, this stuff worked out okay. I actually think the pacing in this movie is actually pretty good, especially for a 3.5-hour movie. It's the first time that actually played well as a miniseries too. It's like Kick-Assio was always supposed to be a movie. It's supposed to be seen, as a film pretty much. It wasn't supposed to be a miniseries, cut up into that many parts and stuff, but it's sort of what happens. And this is an effect. It is, we did do it in camera, but then to make it even more sort of menacing and more impressive, I did actually blur Noah a little bit more and unblur him. Where was I? Okay, so we got Kick-Assio, which is great as a film, not really much as a 8-part or whatever 6-part thing. Suburban Nights, which got a little closer because we're constantly cutting back and forth, between this adventure and there's this journey and stuff like that. Uh, but still, it works better just when you see it all together. This one was actually working pretty well, both as a movie and a miniseries. You could actually watch it. You can watch it all together, but actually in parts, it works out all right too. That was it. The original line there was me saying, "What mental asylum did you escape from anyway?" And they said that afterwards. I'm like, nah, that's funny. Let's just go with that. J. Ross also made that little thing on her eye there. It's really good. There was some. I have different memory of, assigning the 7 of 9 suit. I recall saying, get something that's kind of form-fitting, but still be comfortable. I even wrote down, I want you to breathe, because I know the outfits the past years have not been, like, the most comfortable. And I don't know, maybe it's just a male-female thing, because maybe just kind of form-fitting is just unbelievably uncomfortable and you can't breathe or whatever. She looks great in it. And it definitely took time to do, too. I mean, like, the hair took a lot of time. Getting the outfit took a lot of time, I guess, because it was so tight. So honestly, yeah, it's... You're either gonna laugh at that or you're not. I think it's pretty funny. This was always just the strangest setup that Rob had in there, but it was... I just thought it was so funny, because it is essentially still just 2 houses. Like, asking a neighbor for sugar. I love the way Paul says, sucrose levels are normal. Those ears, by the way, are not Vulcan ears. They're actually, like, elf ears, I think. There were 2 that we could choose from. I think Holly got it. It was, like, elf ears and then, like, Spock ears. And the elf ones just looked better. I love the way Joe's very much like a cartoon, just boo. Okay, if you go back to that shot, you'll see a picture in the background. I doubt you even noticed it, but it's a shot of the Virgin Mary, because that's actually at my folks' basement. Which leads me to the other thing I should admit, whether people realize it or not. When I start off the nostalgia critic, I actually was still with my folks. So that, for the longest time, I always told people, like, when they were doing commentaries with me, just don't point that out, because it looks bad, like, the head of this, something that is doing very well, is still his folks' house, so... I mean, I'm obviously not anymore, but yeah, it's like it was originally at my folks' house. I always told people, shh, don't bring that up. But, yeah, where was I going with this? So they had a picture of the Virgin Mary down there, and I was just like, that just sort of looks odd, so we were just putting a bag or whatever the background, or a separate wall on top of the Virgin Mary, and Rob was just standing there shaking his head like, really? You're covering it up, the Virgin Mary? I'm just like, damn it, it's just distracting! That's actually their character I was debating whether or not they have Justin B. I was almost thinking he should have, like, little Star Fox ears on, or the little headset thing that Fox has. All these sort of smoke effects and such were done by Rob and Jim. They did a very, very good job. A lot of us are used to kind of talking to ourselves. This is never really that difficult to do. There's some people have a problem with it, but I mean, for us, it's always been pretty easy. He's my favorite delivery in the whole movie. Love it. He did one just sort of like, Terrell, oh my god, I talked to you like a few days ago, and I said, no, it's gotta be, you gotta go all out, you gotta, I mean, this is like the 8th time I don't know who you are, you have to snap, and he just did that great, Terrell! Love it. I can't remember who came up with it. Turl was always in it. We always agreed it should be Turl because he'd just be such a fun villain. I can't remember if I came up with Zod. It was probably me, probably wanted to get more screen time or whatever to play Zod. I just love the idea of the two of them together. I love the idea of two villains just constantly bickering. Again, just that competition and that jealousy. That's just such great humor, and I love writing it. And Rob apparently loves writing it too, because he wrote a lot of these scenes. Now I think this was just written in the script as, you know, Guard stabs Phelous and just will not die. He's constantly coming back. And we just sort of improvised this. And it's not exactly as you see. It's a little edited down. But, yeah, we just said go as long as you can. It was just Orlando and Phelan. Phelan was off screen, and he was just improvising all of this. And it's just... Oh, this kills me. No pun intended. My parents this little, oh, come on! And the other with the little, that wasn't so bad. Oh! And this one, after the shot was done, I mean, I was like crying. I was laughing so hard. I mean, this just was so funny. Why would he say that? Why would he say, I think I'll be all right? I think the last one he said before I finally cracked was, you know, oh, nice working with you, buddy. That's why I finally cracked. I said, okay, we got it, we got it. I like Noah, actually, so it's like at first they're very mournful, and then by the end they're just like, yeah, come on, come on. Actually, I never noticed. You can see Phelan's arm in the back there. He's actually waiting. He's already there. It was intentional. I'll say it was intentional. In reality, his shirt actually looks more orange, but in the film it looks more red, so it works out okay. But that was a concern where you're like, you know, this is looking kind of orange. Is it still going to play all right? Now, that's one of those takes where every time he did, I was never fully satisfied. But I was just like, okay, let's just move on. And even on its own, it doesn't usually get a laugh, but when it's all put together and you see that line, it's so funny, and it's so interesting how much, you know, a scene on its own or in connection with everything else can get a laugh or it can't get a laugh. I mean, that is why something like Kick-Ass works so much better as a film. You know, you see it all together, as opposed to chopped up into pieces, where I think this actually can work well either way. Well, but I talked about that. This is always an idea I wanted to do in something sci-fi related, because I just never understood why. Maybe there is a reason, I don't know, but why these people couldn't just beam aboard, kill the captain, and then just be like, we're running this ship now? You know, what's stopping them? I mean, I think I've even seen a few Star Treks where they could do that, where they just beam aboard and, like, shoot some people. And so we just had this idea where the ship is so incompetent that they would only be able, everyone can just do their job, so once one person is gone, that's the only one that can do it. I just love this idea of this chaos of just, you have this action scene happening on Earth. It's like, this should be very, very simple. You should just be able to, you know, beam something back, you know, or beam a person back or get somebody, but everyone's just trying to figure out their job and everyone's just behind on what they should know how to do. And just how long can that go and how many steps backwards do they have to take, right down to opening the first page of operating the ship. This gets a huge laugh. Every time somebody sees it, they just crack up. I love that it's still on the screen like it's the crew watching this. The hell was that? This outfit was made by Featherweight, who's made some costumes before, and he's very, very talented. This is actually practically his living, just making these costumes. And love this. Little Stallone mugging. That gun was made by them too, by Featherweight. And the funny thing is that the actual measurements of the helmet, they're sort of big on purpose. So it's like I gave them these measurements. I sort of made a little big purposely so it look a little funny. But I think even then I gave measurements that were wrong. They were still even too big for what I had in mind. So it's just gigantic, and I love it. It just reminds me of a Dark Helmet. Now, the scene of the three of them beaming out, even though Chad just said it was going to be two, I think that came from an idea I had where that's actually what messed up the teleporter. That's why stuff, he couldn't beam them in immediately after. It's because he did do three, and the critic accidentally said beam the three of them out. But I don't think that comes through. I don't think I made it very clear. I sort of thought to myself, is it really that big a plot point, whatever? It turns out it kind of was, so I should have explained that. Now here's the part I thought really needed no explaining. I mean, it's just, there is nothing blocking them, and yet they're still missing each other. And it just cracked me up because I thought, you're not even seeing any ricochets or anything, because you just always see that in these dumbass action movies and Star Wars and stuff. They just can never hit the target. Now the target is right there, and the critic has three of them to shoot. I was even debating whether or not I was going to put in this line where just at some point one of them says, God, we're bad at this. And it's one of those things where sadly just I should have spelled it out because everyone's just like, how do they keep missing him? How can they never blah blah blah? It's just okay, I guess I should have made it more obvious that it was intentional. It cracks me up. It's just especially just when he's backing away and firing. It's just like, how can you miss this guy? Well, we knew we needed some outside shots as well, because by God, the whole thing is inside. It's inside and green screen and stuff like that. Hell, even Bram Stoker's Dracula, which was shot entirely inside, they at least mimicked being outside. It's like you have to have some outside shots, and these are shot very nice. This is actually one of the locations when Chad came to shoot his scenes. I said, time is tight. I have to actually go look for locations. You want to come with? He's like, yeah, sure. So we actually found this nice area. And the grass, as you can tell when we're running, we have to sort of run a little high on. Oh, that's a shot Jim did, joking. It just sort of as a lark, like, I think I can do it. Let me just try it. So we just set up, the three people that we had and just had them always, just at various times walking forward at different places and stuff like that. While he was doing that, I actually took one of the guards' son, his son actually, who just wanted to come with to watch us shoot. I was just like, okay, you're a cameraman now. Let's shoot a few scenes over here. And he got shot of me like hiding behind the bush and getting the gloves out and stuff like that. And Jim pulled off that really cool shot. It's pretty damn impressive. Is this the first time you see that Gord is not necessarily a bad guy? We sort of set him up that he might be intimidating. We don't know who he is or what he is, but here you actually see him specifically help the critic. And there's a little clue there, the wedding ring. Which is actually my wedding ring, but James has the exact same ring, so there's your little clue. I love that shot. Rob got that shot so well. I sort of turned Joe into this doofus who's just always saying the wrong thing at the wrong time during this scene. He's trying to be very, enthusiastic. I think at one point I had film brain, but I'm just like, nah, it's funnier if it's Joe. This, and it's funny because again, you're gonna like it or you're not. And some people say this is where the film finally sort of like, they finally got some action in it for them, and it's the physical comedy. It isn't just people standing around talking and explaining plot and stuff. And other people are like, hey, come on, where's the story? We want the story, blah, blah, blah. So you're either gonna be for it or you're not. And I remember when I was editing this, Jim came down and said, for an entirely pointless scene, this is pretty damn funny. At least start slapping him, too. This is a joke I always wanted to use in something. It looks like he's going to talk, he just punches him. Very immature. I'm so glad we could get Ben in this. It's one of those things, we didn't have him down this year, but it's like, we still want him in there because he was there from the beginning, and I just knew he could do this well. Of course, when he does that dance, it's just wonderful. That outfit, as you can tell, gets more and more sort of torn apart as the action scene goes on. So we tried our best to sort of shoot it in order. Um, so that by the end, we shot the scenes that we knew we absolutely needed first, and then anything, it's like, okay, we could kind of do this as filler, we could kind of whatever, we don't essentially need it, we can edit around it. We shot those scenes later, and it's a good thing we did because it did just fall apart. It just came apart by the end after the last shot. I love stuff like this where suddenly it's like the henchman and the star and everything. It's like they're suddenly on the same page. It gives it just adds more to the comedy. It's an action scene, but it's comedy first. I mean, it's just going back and forth. I love slapstick. So one shot, I don't like the way that turned out. That the lighting was putting him in shadow a little too much. Always had that in the script. that Benzai would be doing that. I just love it. I mean, it's just constantly cutting back and forth between, just such incompetence and such, just people scrambling over something that, seems so simple. And then you have, it's like the real action is going on down there, but you also have just this race of who can get their ship working first. And this is Pirke. This is the critic, kicking ass again, or at least thinking he's kicking ass and then having it blow up in his face. And that is one of the great things about, doing comedy, is that you can be the action hero. You can do all this stuff. You just have to have a punchline at the end. I love this. No flinching. I love it. I love the blowing, trying to cool it down. Like, every time, it's just, I love that going back and forth. It's like, as Jackie Chan figured that out about action scenes, is that it's not always somebody always has the advantage. It's constantly going back and forth, and just how much the other side will gloat. And the critic, of course, is a great gloater, so every single time he can show off that, he's winning, he will. That was improvised. That was great. And again, anything to make the guards look more human, and just more incompetent. It's like in another movie, this action scene would, really kick ass and really be like, this hardcore thing with a lot of explosions and the hero does everything right. But here it's just everybody's trying to just function. This I probably stole from Red Dwarf. And I think so much of comedy does come from that. It just comes from people trying to function, trying to, make do, or trying to get ahead of the game and just constantly failing. That's right. I love this scene. And I love him coming back and just... And of course, Chad, trying to play the hero there. Love it. I think his glasses fly off there. That's what happens. His glasses under the visor. Now, here's something I should have done. Rob convinced me to take music out of there. I should have put it in when Turl is there. When he holds up the gun. I hear the music once again going da 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 da, and then when the guns go up, it stops. And I took it out. I think I should have left it in. I love this, just the cowardliness, the constant, just nobody knows what to do, how to do it, why didn't they think of this before? And just them taking off, like a Looney Tunes cartoon, I love it. I think it was a great relief for so many people, because they were just looking at so much dialogue, and so much people talking, which is fine. There's a lot of humor in our dialogue and everything, but you have to mix it up. You have to try and hit as many people as you can. And this was actually a cockpit that originally was going to be for Noah doing the whatchamacallit. doing his scenes, firing at the critic later. But again, we ran out of time, so we use it for Brian's scenes. These are so nicely melded together. I love it. That's good dialogue here. And for anyone that did think that the Judge Dredd scene went on too long with the slapstick, don't worry. There's more of what you love: sitting and talking. That's right. Yes, we know that you haven't seen much of that in this film. But we are, in fact, bringing you more. Now, Matthew's throwing off a little bit. He's standing and talking, which I know may jar some of you. But it's okay, because he goes right back to sitting and talking. Absolutely, yes. You know, all that action and excitement from before, I mean, you don't have to deal with that now. You get more sitting and talking. Because I know you've been missing it. Luke's reaction there is great. And for anyone that, you know, was maybe sick of the sitting and talking, thought there was too much, you know, it's okay, because we throw it off right here. Something very exciting. We have laying down and talking. I know, again, I know you were sick of the constant running around and excitement and shooting and stuff like that was in that scene, and, well, none of the others. But it's okay, because, like I said, we go right back to what some of those people who just love, you know, letting people have their own opinions and enjoy whatever, you know, they just want to warn us that the scene before did not please them, and will, in fact... they will let them still have their own respectable opinions. Basically, the people who liked it, and the people that don't want to ruin it for everybody. It's always how I see it. Which is always one of the interesting things, again, about the critic, is that, and again, that's why I'm so strong on the critic's a loser. He's not a positive character, and that's the joke. It's that he wants to make his opinion your opinion. And, you know, that's just a sign of unbelievable insecurity. You know, it shouldn't be. There's no book that says you will like this, you will like that. I mean, that's just, opinions aren't facts. So if you like the scene, you know, you like the scenes of people talking and don't like the action scenes, great. If you like the action scenes and don't like the scenes of people talking, great. You know, you're entitled to like whatever you like. It's always the people where once they hear, I like this, it's, oh, how can I just, oh, I lost all respect for you. Oh, no, I just, oh. You know, those are people that sadly need to force their opinions on you so they can feel more right. And speaking of people who want to force their opinions on you so they can feel more right, got more of this great sucka stuff. And this is the first time you see Rob sort of out of the executor makeup, and you see him sort of as Palpatine. He does that voice so well. I heard like he had to smoke a shitload in order to get that voice. Which he's not usually like a heavy smoker at all. I dare even say he's not even really a smoker. Every once in a while he might have like a clove or something, but you know, he's really not a smoker. The return of my ex-girlfriend here, who I don't know why. She's the only one I just saw in this role. I just thought, could get the big puppy dog eyes. Please, sir. And it was fun because actually her husband was there that day we shot this, and that was great going up just saying, look, I just want to take, you know, your wife that used to be my ex-girlfriend, chain her up, throw her in a closet, and film it to show to everybody. I don't know what you're getting so upset about. I don't. But in actuality, her and her husband and me and my wife, we went out, we had dinner immediately after and had a wonderful time. So I don't trust everybody when they say, oh, once you're broken up, you have to stay broken up. You can't talk to each other, whatever. If you're grown up and you're adults, you can do it very well. Which is not to say everybody. Every case is like that. There's certainly girlfriends I would not like to see again. But if you can be adults and you can both be smart and civilized, I see no problem. Now, the three people you just saw there, there's a few people there. The first two were Jason and Jory, who have been big supporters in the past. Actually, Jason's one of the guards. They let us use their house in Suburban Nights. Just always big supporters, and just genuinely nice people. Uh, you had James, who had his heart ripped out in Suburban Nights. You had Holly, who actually came to this production, I forgot to mention, after surgery. Was literally in the middle of this, she had surgery and still came in and worked, which is, that's a tough cookie. Absolutely did not have to, and she came in regardless. So that's really pretty awesome. And then the people after that, that was the We Shot First people. If you're wondering what they look like, again, I wanted to get them a cameo in there. The scene plays out really nice. Again, it's tricky because you have to keep it. It still has to be the critic, and he can't emote too much in a sense that he can't be. It can't be me. It can't be me acting. It has to still be the critic. And like I said, there is a difference between the two. And the critic still has to be a little annoyed, a little, I don't know, he's still kind of like a little kid in a lot of ways, this very impatient little kid. But as he says, things are changing, and he's sort of, he's seeing it, and he's verbalizing it, and he's sort of opening up more and more with Matthew. I love this shot. This is a shot I always wanted to get. I didn't know if I could, and I found this effect on Premiere, and it just turned out so nice. This is mostly just trailer fodder, too, for the first teaser trailer. I mean, it is, but it does connect to what you're going to see and what's going to happen, so it's totally justified. I'm not against having trailer fodder in a movie as long as it's justified. And again, you get away with it because you have a punchline. I think I wrote this scene because I recall writing the, what was it? I want you to want me to give you another chance. I love that line. Allison does really good here, and Todd does really good. I mean, really, everyone does well when they have to sort of do these kind of dramatic moments, and they sell it pretty decently. To a point where I was actually nervous about having Allison wave at Phelan at the end. I was like, oh my god, did I do this? Hopefully I didn't do this too well, where people are actually going to be like, oh, what the hell? She can't go with Phelan? Oh, we love those two together. We love blah, blah, blah. But I think we played up just enough comedy and enough other things going on that I don't think anyone took it too seriously. At least not so much that they couldn't, didn't make a joke out of it. Or enjoy the joke, I should say. Todd is so good at making himself sort of look like a brute. It's just the, hey, nostalgia chick, we go. It is tough because you have to write for reviewers that essentially they're going to be cynics. That's just sort of the idea of the critic and the reviewer, is that they're going to be sort of these cynical jerks. But you have to sort of play up different levels and give them sort of different angles and stuff. I mean, that is one of the reasons I sort of have Matthew the way he is because I sort of thought he could play that, and I sort of knew, yeah, he can do this pretty well. If all the critics got together, this is probably maybe a little bit more Would He Be Like or whatever. So I don't know, it seemed to fit. It's sort of the same thing with Todd. Todd would be a little bit of a, okay, And Allison would sort of be, even though we'd sort of written her as a doofus, like in the crossovers and stuff, I think she likes playing the doofus. It's like she also has her kick-ass moments, so we sort of play up the kick-ass moments here. This is a joke we figured out when we were actually doing the sets, and we said, how are we going to do engineering? Because it doesn't have to go down to engineering. Is it supposed to be a level down? It's like, well, maybe we can always act like it's a level down, but really, it's just the door next door, and we can rip off the Spaceballs joke. Where they're trying to teleport it, really, it's just one door over. It was tricky not showing, in the trailer, not showing Robo-Todd or Justin with his shirt off. Because I was showing everybody sort of in their character roles. But I just knew this was going to be such a funny reveal. That I had to go with it. And the robotic sound effects. I remember when we first put that outfit on, it was so difficult to get on, and it was so tight. And after it was on, he looks at me. He says, "Thank you, Doug." And I just went, well, "I'm sorry. I thought it'd be a funny joke." He's like, "No, legitimately, thank you. This is a dream come true. I can't believe I'm RoboCop." He was actually pretty happy. So another one of those crazies who doesn't mind truly suffering for his work. It does take some madness, because by the time this was done, I mean, I really thought like, well, boy, howdy, that was great. Everything went so well. There weren't that many problems and blah. We just stayed up a little late, but that's not too bad and blah blah blah. And yeah, then I was told sort of what everyone else thought, and again, I was just like, okay, I can't do that to them again. I just can't put people through that. But there are, I mean, it does take a hint of madness because I mean I did stay up as late as everyone else. I actually got up earlier to work out so I could keep my energy up the whole time because I was just determined not to, not to get lazy, not to get grouchy, not to get anything, But I mean just try and move stuff through as fast as I could. But the downside, it was still a 3.5 hour movie shot in 6 days. So, sadly, that means a lot of people didn't get much sleep. I didn't get much sleep, and it was tough. But again, I mean, there are people who, love what they do so much they will let it hurt them, which I'm not saying is healthy necessarily. And it does take a certain kind of madness, Finally, at some point, I was trying to rationalize with myself. I'm like, well, is everybody crazy but me? Because that sounds like a totally logical, sane way of looking at stuff. Or the more logical route, I'm the crazy one, who, you know, sort of went through all this stuff. It was like, golly gee, okay. And yeah, that seems much more like the logical conclusion. So, I mean, like I said, I finally decided I'm not going to. If you find other people just as insane, maybe it's worth doing, but it's never worth putting people through stuff where they're going to be miserable the whole time and you're pushing them too far. I mean, that really is my nightmare. So, like I said, one of the reasons I'm backing out of these big projects and our movie projects, but definitely going to throw just as much time, if not more time, into the shows, which are going to be pretty awesome. I'm glad people caught on that Phelan was the red shirt, and so he just constantly has to die. If anything, maybe that sort of explains his death in the past as well. And I know he hasn't been doing them as much anymore. I know it's kind of an old joke, but I mean, it's one of those things where it's like, oh, he's a red shirt, he's in sci-fi, and he dies all the time. He always comes back. You can't overlook it. You have to do it. Lewis comes in and says, God, I don't know where you guys always come up with this impression of me, but okay, let's do it. And he does just this perfect over-the-top impression that pretty much we always do of him. Is there the, yeah. And he knows we do it. I mean, he actually, like, at some conventions, he'll be like, all right, you're going to imitate me. Be as cruel as you want and blah, blah, blah. So, I mean, and of course, when he goes up there and does it, it just does it great. I mean, it's got a good sense of humor. Here's the scene Rob was pretty insistent on keeping in. I actually didn't care if we kept it or not. I knew it would probably get a big laugh. I mean, stuff like this usually doesn't make me laugh that hard, with the exception of his face. That face is great. But I mean, the idea of just showing off somebody's body parts, or showing off their body or something, honestly, I just do it when I don't have another laugh. When I don't have another joke, it's sort of a last resort. It's sort of like sex jokes or penis jokes or whatever. It's just, when you don't have anything else, it's like, well, this is almost guaranteed to always get a laugh. And there's nothing wrong with it. People like those jokes, great. Just for me, it's one of those things where I'm like, if we lose it, no big loss. And it's probably good we didn't, because so many people enjoyed that and got a big laugh out of it. This scene, I really love. The two scenes where I really felt the writing was really kind of taking satire just to kind of a different level. One was this scene, and the other was what was it? The scene with Owen Sis and explaining cinema. Because both, and they're both opposite sides of the argument as well, both are making kind of legit points, about film and about lasting and about what is art even. And both are so well written, but they're both satirizing something as well that didn't initially connect with this, but actually they tie in pretty good. Um, and I was really, the two scenes where I was really blown away with the writing, one was this. I was just so impressed by how well not only does it make its point, but it satirizes the other scene so well. That's referencing from Revenge of the Sith. And the Owen Citizen one, I'll get to when we get to that one. Um, what we did with this is that we had them sit uh, in this hallway that's actually leading to the bathroom in the upstairs of my folks' place, and we had this light on them. And one of the We Shot First guys would just be flickering his fingers in front of the light, making it look like there's that there's something they're watching, and then Rob would go in and sort of do this color correction with the red and blue. I was kind of being pressured to get some more various shots of this, or more close-ups, or something, and or different angles. I just felt this scene you have to listen to the dialogue. The visuals can't distract from it. And you do start to, as he gets more and more in depth, of course, you zoom in a bit and you keep it tight. But the focus had to be on the dialogue. Because this is such good dialogue. It's such a good point about, infamy. There's fame and then infamy. Something is so bad it's good. Which in a sense, in a lot of ways, I mean, this is sort of what we aim for at times, or something so goofy it's funny, I mean, because we're comedians and we know the value of something being so bad that it's actually enjoyable. But, does it come at the cost of good art? Which is, of course, no. If you want to make something bad, great. If you want to make something good, great. But no, neither one should, out the other. Which I think is important too, because it's not saying, give up on good art. There's always going to be good art. And there's always going to be people out there, or not even good art, just art that speaks to you. I mean, again, there's no book that says, this is a masterpiece, this is crap. If it speaks to you, it speaks to you. And there's just some things that speak to larger audiences more than others, or certain crowds more than others. And that's very much what the Owen Citizen speech is about, but that will be talked about when Owen Citizen pops up, so we'll talk about it there. This was originally just black, and for a scene, it's fine, but he goes in a couple times, and the black was starting to get a little grating, so Rob was very smart to go in and sort of add these backgrounds and these smoke effects and so forth. And there's no... I mean, we got Matrix, we're sort of hinting at Inception, with sort of this machine that takes into dreams and stuff. This has some hints... I want to say it has some hints of Star Trek V, because when they finally do meet the quote-unquote god, there is sort of this whimsical element to it, and sort of this feel and this music that I wanted to capture as well. Like, even though it's a false prophet, there's still this feeling of when you approach him, you have to feel like you found what you were looking for. Or it's even greater than what you thought you were looking for a moment, and then you find out the truth. So that was very important. Oh no, she's gonna turn down the audio tracks. And this set was actually built. I mean, J-Roz built this that window back there, and it's obviously green screen, which was very difficult to key out because we had to figure out how to light it. And the lighting, because you only have so many lights as well, and there's only so much space you can light that green screen, because the room ends very shortly after that. It's very, 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 very tricky. If I remember, we tried to get there a few hours early to figure out how to do the lighting, I think everyone was so exhausted though. They were just like, let's just take a nap for a bit. Is that okay? Can we blah blah blah? So we knew we had to get there early to actually figure out how we were gonna do the green screen and the lighting and stuff. And it turned out pretty well. I love the way Brad's just sort of like, what the hell, when he does that. That's one of those times where in the movie, if you watch it as a movie, it's not as funny. If you see it as a scene, it's pretty good, where Rob whips out the lightsaber and then Brian knocks it out. In the movie, it's okay. I mean, but if you watch it as a scene, it gets a big laugh. So again, it's so interesting, just the variations and just on, even how you present it and how long you'll wait for something or wait for a laugh or won't wait for a laugh. Rob mugging it up, which I, of course, would know nothing about. Here we play with the lighting a little bit because the forehead piece was kind of starting to fall off. And it's depending on how bright or dark you have your TV, you'll sort of notice in these scenes. When the hood is over it, you can't notice at all. But in these scenes, it was just some of the prosthetics we had to take off because they're kind of melting off because it was hot as hell up here. We couldn't have the AC on because it pick up on the audio. So we had to leave that off. And this is upstairs where it gets super friggin' warm. I remember another really warm one was when I was shooting the car scenes. They got really, really hot. But you can actually see some of my sweat in those shots. I really like the fact that Rob actually keeps it to where it's when he's doing the Emperor or the Executor or whatever. When he's doing Palpatine, his voice is a little bit more, a little bit more pleasant, a little bit more kind, and blah, blah, blah. But then when he's the Executor, is a little more drowned out. Because that's exactly what the actor does in Revenge of the Sith. It's like he's pretty pleasant, with that voice. But still kind of menacing. And then, as soon as he's been electrocuted, for whatever reason, he suddenly talks like this. Good. I think most people like this scene. The thing about the party. I wasn't too sure about it, but it actually turned out pretty good. That nice little nod there. Now, from a writing standpoint, this was very tricky because Bargo, it was supposed to be like the Search for Spock, where actually they were going to get Bargo back and you found his body and stuff like that, but Bargo left to pursue his own activities. So we were kind of stuck because we had this halfway written, even more than halfway written, and we left off in the Suburbanites saying that Mati is going to come back and stuff, and we liked the idea of bringing Mati back, and that'd be it was too good to drop. So we were trying to figure out a way around this, and so we still had the aura or the character that we were satirizing from Star Trek 3, where something was mentally given to Spoonie. So we could play off of that, and then we were sort of talking about, should we have different people kind of do the voices? Should it be Noah doing the voice? Should it be various people doing the voice? At one point, Rob actually wanted an animated Mati talking, from Captain Planet, but we were afraid that might get too many copyright problems. It'd just be a pain to do it. It'd be maybe a little too silly. I don't know. So we ultimately decided to go with this, and most of Mati is Rob, some of it is me. Anytime where it has to sort of go a little lower and a little deeper, that's me. Anytime it's sort of the yelling, pussy, it's usually Rob. So we sort of flip-flop back and forth. We kind of did the same thing with the guards, too. Excuse my voice, by the way. I've been talking for Almost 2.5 hours. We did this one take where Justin just, what would George Takei do? And he just thinks, it goes, of course. And Rob really wanted this one where he would look up and think what George Takei would say. And he literally said, I want like this Terry Gilliam cartoon of George Takei talking. I was just like, okay, I have no problem with that. You have no idea how hard it was to leave that shot out of the trailer where Todd's coming up behind her because it looks so good. I'm pretty sure that's Rob's voice. Slow down just a touch. I was actually kind of shocked that people, when watching it in parts, sort of thought that this was the weakest part, because I thought it had a lot of it had a fair amount of action, it had a fair amount of plot exposition, it had a fair amount of character. And nobody disliked it. I mean, nobody was like, that was awful. I mean, but they're sort of like, yeah, so far that was sort of the weakest part. But just pretty shocked at it, 'cause I think this is pretty funny. Now, did I make it clear that when they're assimilated, they're a little bit more robotic, and that they're sort of made of metal, so that's why the gloves would help? I don't know if I made it clear enough, but it doesn't matter because you're distracted by Justin's nipples by the time you're thinking about it. Now, I dragged this out a bit. Wait, just so he goes aha about 3 times, but we got it from several different angles, so I could stretch it out, because it's just so funny to see him go, aha, 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 aha. At some point, I think he even started doing the Robin Hood Daffy line, spin, haha, thrust. It doesn't faze him at all. I love it. I liked having Mecha on board because it was sort of the only legitimate, I don't want to say legitimate threat, but he wasn't being played for laughs. It was more the fact that nobody could figure out it was him that was the funny part. But he himself was actually kind of threatening. So I thought it was good to have that, because the villains would probably just be a little too silly if he wasn't in there. So I really liked having him in there. I think those are swimming goggles. The more I think about it, it doesn't even make sense. There was, I forget if it was in a draft of the script or not, but there was one version where this is actually when Lewis comes in to save the day as Linkara. The ship actually shoots, his ship actually shoots our ship and knocks Mecha-Kara out or something like that, as a way to get him in. Or I think that was when, that was there instead of Nostalgia Chick knocking him out with the boot. This scene was always in there. This would always be what stops Mecha-Kara, because I thought it was just such a nice way to tie everything up. But the reason we didn't go with Linkara then is that we felt, there's a better area to have him come in and save the day. Let's really build it up. Let's save it. It just gives him his time in the sun, his big glory shot. This was something where, because I discussed with Todd, Allison, and Lindsay, I said, look, I like this love triangle. I wanted to write it in. First of all, can you keep it going for long enough, or at least not end it? And if so, here's what I was thinking about doing with it. I'd actually have it sort of end. And they actually shared with me what they were originally going to do at some point, how they were going to end it. It was going to be Todd shows his face, and we don't see it, but, Lindsay is so horrified by it that she would just immediately be turned off by it, and not want to know. Or just it was so hideous and so deformed. Because we do hint at it one other time. I think they do it in one of their videos where Lisa takes the mask off for a second, just goes, ah! And then puts it back. So it was kind of done before, but not to this extent. And we still never had the Nostalgia Chick see it. Oh, I love a scene like that, because you can either take it, as a legitimate, kind scene, or just totally goofy. And he knows they're taking the boots off there, and then the gloves and stuff. That's so Lindsay can grab it to actually knock Mecha-Kara out later. Or even when Ed, shows how good the character is, when Hope is handing the boots to the critic. I mean, there's a reason he hands it back and doesn't really think about it, so they can take them away into the bag so that they can use it later. So little scenes like that, I mean, you'd be surprised how much you just wouldn't think about it, but or you're not noticing it, in the foreground, but just how friggin' important they are. I think Rob originally had one scene where it was this, but it was Mecha I think, giving the orders or something, and originally, like, Robo Todd and Nostalgia Chick were supposed to fire, but they couldn't because of their compassion for our characters. I was just like, nah, they wouldn't do that. They wouldn't really care. At least not enough to break the programming. The selfish route was the much better route, I think. I really love that line. My twin brother didn't get on the line. He's a compulsive liar. He's a compulsive liar. I'm glad we did actually have Nostalgia Chick do something, because when you sort of looked at the grand schemes, they're sort of like, yeah, what was she actually contributing? It's a funny subplot, but what was she actually, you know, what was the necessary point for her? And that is the point, where she saves the day. And of course, she has her great moment later too with the distraction. But after you don't want it to get too much. You don't want to get too much like jeez, this character's just doing this and that. You want to try your best to give characters their purpose and their time in the sun. This room was tricky because it wasn't very big, so we were very limited to how many angles we could get, and we could only stay on one side of the room. So that was very tricky to pull off. These are kind of out of focus. I don't know why. I guess just the focus wasn't set right, I guess. There's not too many shots like it, though. I never know. Did we gloss over this too fast, or is it okay? Do people get the plot? Do they get the idea? I mean, it's like, we say it all right there. I mean, it's not like we don't say it. We explain everything, but does it go by too fast? I don't know. Nice delivery from Mickey there. Okay, excuse my voice. Oh, now, originally, I should bring this up. When we were talking about who should be the executors, who should be Vader, essentially, originally I was leaning towards Matthew, because I thought it'd just be so funny to see this little Darth Vader running around with this British voice. Oh, I am your father! I just thought it'd be so funny. But in the grand scheme of things, it just seemed to make more sense to have it be Brad. Mostly because, A, we sort of already did that with Matthew and Suburban Nights, with him being the cloak, and B, it just matched the storyline better, with Brad being sucked in. Which was a very interesting choice, and very interesting sort of dynamic, because you wouldn't think the Cinema Snob would do that. You wouldn't think, he's so sort of set in his own ways that you wouldn't think he would sort of go over to this other side, the sort of selling out side. But again, the executors, what he's talking about is very legit, and I think that's why the satire works so well. Because you can sort of side with him. You're like, well, yeah, maybe you should just take, what's best and what you can get and all that good stuff. We've actually joked about having a special edition where we just throw in like a bunch of like whatever, like giant monsters walking in front of the camera and aliens in the background. They're all just so obviously they weren't supposed to be there in the original. This was something that was, I don't want to say risky, but we never really did it before, where we didn't bring in one of the main reviewers until later. Actually close to near the end of the third act, or the beginning of the third act, I should say. And we never really did that before, and it felt right, though. It felt okay, because it seemed like this was his moment to come in. He wasn't in most of it, but when he does come in, he has such important scenes, and they're scenes that people remember. And it was another character we didn't have to constantly fit in all the time. He could just come in and have his moment. Several moments, actually. This gets a big laugh. I do always sort of wonder what kept Luke in the Star Wars movies just from going, what the hell? Oh my god, I'm possessed! I think I'm delusional. I need to take some meds. I need to... The way we did that, by the way, they were never in the same room. We had Matthew yelling and screaming, and then Brian film his stuff on green screen. I love that. Well, I'm a ghost, Luke. That was improvised. That's a great line. You look like a melted candle. A lot of these lines, I was always a little afraid because some of these lines, it's like the Emperor did say them this way in the movies, but I don't know if people remember these lines and the way they were said. You know, like the one he always kept quoting was "peace," which I still don't remember that scene. I just don't remember him saying that way. I don't remember when he says it or whatever. So I'm always sort of concerned, but I mean, the nice thing is that everything is so silly anyway that you could just toss it up to just goofiness. It's not like Monty Python always has to explain, you know, they don't have to explain spam or anything like that. Sometimes just the silliness is enough. But if we need to, we can explain our silliness. Love this stuff. Love it. Loved writing it. Loved writing it with Rob, because like I said, he did a lot of it. I loved saying it. Loved performing it. I was impressed. I can't remember where Kyle found these Yoda ears. They were... He said somewhere actually where he found them. I can't remember. Watch the special features. It'll be on there. Kyle's another one of those people, like, he doesn't... I don't want to say I can't predict how he's going to say a line, but he usually doesn't say it the way I imagine he's going to say it. But what he comes up with is usually better. Even right down to the Moulin Rouge review. I mean, it's like, that's not how I imagine he would say that stuff, but it's so much funnier. It's so much more keeping in character, so you don't fight it that much. What I usually try to do, if a person says something that I feel, well, that's not how I imagined it, I usually try to do one take how I would like it and one take how they would like it, you know, so I can at least choose, you know, because, again, a lot of times I'm wrong, you know, on how to do a take, you know, but sometimes I'm right, and I always say to myself, why didn't I ask him to say it this way, so... But Kyle usually, I mean, his stuff usually didn't need to be redone. He usually got it pretty good. And here's the other big scene. In fact, we actually went back and forth on the music here in terms of how we felt, what kind of music should go there, how loud it should be, how much attention should draw. I was actually a fan of more simple music. Rob sort of wanted more various music, like it's take you on a ride, on an adventure. And this music matches the rest of the movie. I mean, this is in keeping with it. Where I want music where it takes you out, it puts you in a totally different world. And both worked when we looked at them, but in the end, I think I liked this one a touch more. But it was a real coin toss thing. I just could not decide. But anyway, getting to this actual scene, the writing here, originally it was supposed to be more sort of like the Dark City scene near the end when the memories are reimplanted into the main character and before he, like, whatever, blows up the city. It was supposed to work more like that, sort of like the Flash, the scene that Matthew gets when he sees the Executor talking about his plan. It was supposed to be more like that, but the writing was so strong and so good. I said, no, you can't be distracted by the style here. You have to be listening to the words, and the visuals have to support the words, because these are such strong words. And I thought the music should represent that too. So, again, both our choices were Wagner, which is funny. And it just had to be so massive and so huge. And we sort of went back and forth. Rob originally had many more sound effects in there, but again, I was just like, no, I kept telling him, like, your writing is so good, don't take away from it. But some are still in there, you know, and again, it's a compromise. I mean, you just go back and forth between what you think, you know, what will work and what won't, and you have to realize you're not always going to be right. And if it's an area where you sort of feel, you can give a little leeway, you don't feel it destroys anything, do it. Because somebody out there will like it. In fact, it could very well be majority will like it as opposed to what you had. So it's always good to mix it up. This ending I always had. Actually, this piece of music, if you just go back further, this entire piece was what was playing through it. But it has different parts. It's not just that part over and over. Okay, now here's the thing. You're watching Lindsay and Todd. Watch Julian. He steals the show. Just watch his eyes. And he does it just enough. It's not too distracting. Sorry, that's really funny. He's still reacting. I love it. He does just the right amount in that scene. I actually loved it so much I put it in the poster. That's the image I gave the artist to do the poster with. I love that drawn by over there. It's actually drawn by me, but I've taken enough credit. Little scenes like that. I mean, my brother and I live for scenes like that, just where it's, talking about the thread and just everyone goes, oh. I mean, it's very Simpsons. It's very much when everyone, like, pulls at their collar, goes, and yo. I mean, it's so old school, but it's like, you want to keep it alive. Here's the Bothan scene, that everyone, what the hell's a Bothan? I guess now everybody knows what a Bothan is. Because, the minute the internet was born, somebody out there was like, oh, great, I can tell everyone what a Bothan is. I can get my pictures together and blah, blah, blah. The world must know. That's right, don't forget the fucking Bothans. This was another scene where we gave Phelan these lines. And we say, you're just supposed to sort of go up there and take, charge. You take charge of the conversation now. I guess he just wanted to sort of mimic what Galen was doing, so he's just constantly pointing at the chart, even though it has nothing to do with what they're talking about. It just made for a pretty damn good laugh. I love the fact the critics really sort of disappeared for a while here. And I like the fact you're not really asking, oh, where's the nostalgia critic? Where's the main character? Where's blah, blah, blah? I mean, you just sort of accept it, and you're drawn in by everything else that everybody else is doing. And, again, that's the purpose of it. I love that's both sort of very funny and very sad at the same time. It's just sort of over in that corner thinking. You could take it as cowardice, or you could take it as, he's just off thinking of his own thing. He knows he's getting close to the plot hole, so he's putting his own plan together. It's one of the few times where he's not actually being cowardly. He's putting it on as a front. He actually knows himself a little better than, even they know him sometimes. Again, it is sort of evolving the character. I love going from this music to that. Zod just looks so hurt. One of the big concerns was because we were so pressed for time, I wasn't able to get a lot of the shots that I wanted, and we sort of had to just always go to this 2-camera system where you get one reaction and then another reaction, you just cut back and forth. But what really pulls it through is that there is so much of cutting. There are so many scenes to cut to that you never notice that you are sort of looking at sort of the exact same couple of shots when you go to these scenes, and they're very standard shots. We always try to make it a little bit more visually interesting. I hate straight-on shots. They are so boring, and so many people get them in movies. I mean, so I put the camera just a little higher, or a little lower. I mean, just something to add interest. And so many people always ask when shooting, "Well, why are you shooting it so down low? Why are you shooting it so up high?" It's because everybody's done the other way. It's not visually interesting. It's a bore. You know, especially if you do it down low, it makes you'll find actually the action, even what they're saying, suddenly has more weight because they seem larger and it seems more like what they have to say is more important. So even there, it's a sort of a lower angle. Now, a lot of these scenes, you'll notice there's a. I shouldn't bring this up because you're gonna only look at it the whole time now, but there's a nick on my neck there, right dab on the Adam's apple. And when I shot a lot of these scenes, like I said, I did them in a couple days, and I just sort of did them in a row. And so this, and when I'm about to leave, you know, or whatever, leave the plot hole or whatever, I have that nick in there, and it drives me insane. But Matthew is just as bad a shaver, so hopefully it distracts. Again, this is the point where this is very cold, and he's actually shared a lot of stuff with Film Brain, you know, and he has been sympathetic, but that also it also feels that gives him the right to be anything he wants. There is no filter at all, and again, that is the advantage and disadvantage, you know, to when people will totally open up to you, is that they will not hide anything, and they don't give a shit about your feelings at times. Uh, so you do have sort of this very cold scene, and I like not like, you know, what I'm sort of ripping off here is the last episode of Cowboy Bebop when one of the characters is essentially probably going to go off to their death. And it's not a big hug, it's not a do what you have to do, it's not any of that. It's very cold. And something about that just seems much more fitting because it's not the typical hug, it's not the you're doing the right thing. It's especially for something like this where you don't know if he's going to do the right thing. You don't know if he's going to leave or not. Again, both sides are very tempting. Um, it creates a little bit more of a mystery. Again, that was kind of improvised. The two scenes I shot again because I wasn't satisfied how they were before. One was when I was opening up to Nostalgia Chick a bit, where I opened up way too early and I saved it for the end. And then the other was that one because I think I had something written down, but I wasn't feeling it, so I started to improvise a little bit. And it just worked so much better. It worked with the fact that the Nostalgia Critic is kind of ranting, but he's also confessing something, you know, that, you know, there might be something out there where finally all this stuff that's made him selfish, maybe that'll go away, and maybe he can be a good person somewhere else. Maybe he can start over. I think that's sort of why it ties in so well with Mati, because Mati died and he feels responsible. He feels that he can start over somewhere, someplace else. You know, and in the end, he takes responsibility, which is, you know, ultimately the right thing. And you'd be shocked, actually, how difficult it is at times to take responsibility for your actions or something you've done, or even if you think it's not wrong or right. I mean, it's like you always sort of grow up with these, you know, you think that, oh yeah, well, that when that decision comes, I'll make the right decision and stuff, and you'd be surprised just how complicated life can get and how tricky it is to stay, you know, in this ethical realm when everyone else is trying to pull you in another direction. It can get very, very tough. But that's why we have movies like this. I make these movies to change your life and make good ethical decisions. Now here's originally when I was putting this together, I was gonna have Lewis be in Kyle's place because it was a holdover from Suburban Nights where he wanted to sing. But after Moulin Rouge, and after the fact, you know, because he wanted to sing in Moulin Rouge, and just the fact that he has the beard and he looks much more like him, much more like Nan, it just made more sense. And on top of that, I knew he could hit this note. I love the applauding of the Coke cans. We sort of thought of that on the set. we knew we wanted them to applaud, but they still had to be holding the Coke, so we're like, just applaud the Coke. I'm always impressed how well Lindsay can mimic other people. Actually, everybody we've always had her mimic, in these anniversaries, she does very well. Like, she actually does. She can make it so she can look like Palin. She can make it so she can look like Liv Tyler. She can make it where she can look like Seven of Nine or Ursa. It's actually pretty impressive. I don't know if it's just the shape of the face or if it's just one of those things where she constantly just knows the right makeup or whatever, but it does a very good job. If you actually notice on there, now that was something, originally the eyes were supposed to open and it was just supposed to be like in the eyes, you'd see some computer jargon. But that was a little too difficult to do, so Jim came up with this other alternative, which is so much cooler, which is the screen would actually appear in front of her. And if you actually look, it says lyrics at the very top backwards. Yeah, so pretty much everything here, everything having to deal with the Executor and Brad and Luke was Rob. Anything about this story was essentially Rob. I had very little input on this stuff. My stuff was mainly sort of the slapstick, the action, the love triangle, anything involving the critic, any of those talks. And then the rest we sort of just both worked on. The We Shot First guys, they brought this tripod. I didn't know a tripod could do the things that this tripod was doing, because these actions were so smooth, and they weren't jerky at all, so we could get these, quick pans back and forth, and these fast tilts, and it just made so many of these jokes so much funnier. The song sequence, I always wanted to do. I always really wanted to do this. We were very... When I say we, I mean sort of like Rob and Di and stuff. I mean, more Rob was nervous. I mean, he really thought this was like just gonna bomb. He was like, this has nothing to do with the story. It's really weird. It's an 80s tune. I don't think this is gonna work. And now Rock Band is asking for the song, actually. We just signed a contract to get it in the game, so look for that. I guess it started to add concern in me too, because then I was sort of like, well, gee, are we even singing it right? Are we? So I started to add some sound effects of like shooting over it and the sound effects of the car and such, because I was afraid maybe we weren't singing it well enough or maybe it wasn't coming out. So I just got really paranoid about it, and people love it. I'm so glad they love it. Because it was one of those scenes I really wanted to work on, I really wanted to edit, and I miss scenes like this. You don't see these anymore, where it's sort of like, and maybe understandably so, you can see why. I mean, to have a musical moment during an action scene is pretty silly, but in a comedy, you can get away with it. And actually, that is where they get away with it. This is pretty much ripping off Shrek 2 and Short Circuit 2 of the I Need a Hero scene. But I love those scenes. This is one of those scenes, I mean, the two scenes I was always playing in my mind over and over that I just could not wait to edit, I couldn't wait to film, I couldn't wait to get it done, was this and the Flight the Navigator scene. Those were the two that I just eagerly wanted to get to, and they turned out great. And they're so enjoyably corny and cheesy and over the top. I just love it. But they're so enjoyable. The little things like having the applause over my voice and stuff, it's like I wasn't sure if people were gonna like our voices or not. I don't know why I got that paranoia, but people really seem to like it, and it's actually, you can buy the download on Bandcamp. Look it up. Actually, I was kind of shocked. A lot of people were asking, is that really Lindsay singing? Wow, she can sing. She can sing. She's sung before. She's sung several times. There was talk about maybe having like an explanation point when the guards turn around and the little sound. I know it sounds weird, but that was just a little too much for me. I don't know why. Yeah, there is where it was gonna go. I just ultimately decided not to. Maybe I sort of felt it would distract from that too, of her knocking out the R2 guards. There's originally going to be a little bit more dancing. I actually did have a few dance moves mapped out, but again, it's just we were running low on time. I wanted to get people to sleep. So what we ultimately just had Kyle improvising his dances and her fighting in the back there. That's so funny. The one that we did work in, I know I wanted, because again, it was edited in my head. And in fact, I think it started taken from Chicago. I rip off a lot from Chicago in terms of angles and shots during these scenes. Is when the Critic and Turl start actually playing chicken with each other. I knew I wanted Zod and Oensis in the back start doing this weird, I don't know what it is, sort of like lion tamer move while Nostalgia Chick would be stepping forward, doing the lines, and that the shots would get closer and closer as they would get closer and closer to them getting, doing the firing. This sticker here, if you can't read, it does say "Don't fuck with Mara Wilson." So you see, even Mara got her cameo in. Yeah, these shots, love the editing here. I've always wanted to do a scene like that in a song sequence where the camera's getting closer and closer to the singer, but it's also getting closer and closer to the action. I love that Noah gave me a take with the Goofy yell. Don't those effects look wonderful? I don't know if I give enough shout out to the effects. I mean, I certainly praise Jim like mad, Jim Trokin, because he did so much. But the other effects people just did such a good job at it. Just the animation, the skins and the textures and stuff like that, and it's just really something. Now watch here, you'll see him mouth fantastic. He thought I was fantastic? I love that. That's a line that sadly sort of gets overlooked. Just a lot of people don't really notice that. I think it's such a funny line. We're not retreating, you surrendered. It's such a Joe line. This was always kind of a concern. Will people pick up that the ships turn and fire at each other because they sabotaged it? It seems to play okay. People seem to get the general reaction. But I was wondering if we should have stated they're going to turn and fire at each other. Should we have said that, or is this funnier? I don't know. Maybe it's fine the way it is. I love these last two ships here. Boom! And then that reaction's great. And having Turl come in right after it, this is all wonderful. This is that shot there is taken from a Looney Tunes cartoon where I think it's Bugs Bunny, Yosemite Sam are on these two pirate ships, and they're just constantly firing back and forth, but they just stay exactly still. They never move. It always cracked me up. It's just pure, it's just them shouting, fire, 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 fire! It's just so immature and childish. Here, because we didn't have as many people in the room, we could finally move the camera around a little bit and get a few different angles. But for the most part, I had to go back to the other side of the room again. J-Roz also made the helmet for that. He made that whole machine, actually. Very, very good. All this stuff I can't do, and I can't comprehend how other people do it. I'm just always amazed when I see it. There's always sort of been talk about whether or not we sort of knew we shouldn't and we wouldn't bring up Luke's father, because it is Colin Mockery. And we sort of felt what he felt too, that, he should be able to stand on his own. He shouldn't be able to just, people should like him or whatever, get some fame because he's, somebody famous' son. But with this, we couldn't avoid it. I mean, we had a person named Luke, and we're doing Star Wars, and we have to make a joke about Luke's father. I mean, it's like, it was unavoidable. I mean, people would kill us if we didn't make that joke. So we had no choice. We had to do it. My favorite little improv here is when Phelan says, "Who let that in here?" That's one of my few effects there, is actually I did do that smoke effect. That gets a huge laugh. I'm always so happy. That really gets a big laugh. That was a great. You know, it was either that moment or the moment when the critics decided to step out of the house that I knew I needed to cut it for the next part. And that moment just seemed perfect because it's like, what the hell is in there? And that mystery, again, if the critic wasn't there, or he didn't absorb when Insano was saying any outcome is possible, it's a plot hole, and explaining it, it wouldn't have been as powerful. That really just changed everything in terms of the dynamic. I mean, to a point where it's like, where before I thought like, oh, I have to go through this whole script one more time and change this and that. It was like, actually nothing needed to be changed except for that one aspect. So it is incredible just what that, you know, sometimes what the tiniest change can do. Love getting shots like that, those smooth shots. I love getting those. One requirement that Jim Trokin said, while doing effects is that he says he must be able to supply the when it spits out the sugar. So that is Jim's that you hear there. What a mugger. Oh, you know, I should address this. Some people ask, well, why doesn't Zod fly around? Why doesn't Zod do this and that, you know, like Zod does? My response is always, I don't know if I ever mentioned this anywhere. I just realized maybe I didn't. My response is always, didn't you see the end of Superman 2? You know, his powers are taken away. And then he's dropped into a little bed of dry ice. People just assume he's dead, but no, he got up, he walked. It's not easy walking from, you know, Antarctica, you know, and from the North Pole and stuff. It's very tricky, so it'll take a while for him to recover, and now he's back, and just because he doesn't have his powers doesn't mean he doesn't have some good political beliefs, so, yeah, that's my excuse. We also like the fact that we wrote in something, you know, this plot hole just really did give us a perfect out for just anything we couldn't explain or any mistake we've made in the past. You know, explaining why Dr. Insano was also spoony, you know, all that stuff. I mean, any mistake in the past, we could always just say plot hole, which is a cheat. I mean, it is a writer's dodge, but it works. Just barely, but it works. So this came back to, this is sort of my theory of what would happen if somebody evolved beyond the creator. If from a religious standpoint, if someone actually evolved beyond God, God greater than the creator, that would bring on the end of the world, was my thought. If somebody could leave the creation and become more powerful. That's essentially where this came from. This was always what the idea was about. Now, in the original idea when I had it, the character does decide to go back to the story, because it was always something that a person wrote, and the character evolved beyond it. They do go back to the story, but they can now manipulate the story, and they can become different characters and stuff like that, which sadly, obviously, I couldn't really do with the Nostalgia Critic. You know, it's like once he ends, he sort of has to end. He has to make the sacrifice. But that's always where the idea of the story came from, or at least for this ending. But I never had a story to put it to, and finally I had a story. So that's, I don't know, some people were confused by it, some people thought it was kind of straightforward. That's initially the idea, that if he leaves, the world will disappear. You know, the story will disappear, because it's like, it's not something you can recreate, the creation has left. You know, and everything, it's the idea that everything has a point and a purpose, and what would you rather have, the world where you do have point, you do have purpose, or the great mystery? You know, and that's a struggle a lot of people still have. we're trying to figure out what they like or what they prefer, what they don't prefer, what's depressing, what's optimistic. I mean, because a lot of people can find that standpoint of, having someone determine your destiny very disturbing. I think it's a very disturbing idea, to be honest. I love this little rollaway he has. He actually didn't tell us he was going to do this. We thought he was just going to get up and walk, but he did this. Very funny. Phelan looks great in these shots, doesn't he? I mean, he's just looking so, he's soaking up the captain element. He's finally getting his time in the sun. Now, this scene coming up here where, with Hope and Chad, is a very short scene, but Chad was having trouble getting this line for whatever reason. And it's just funny because Chad is a pretty tall guy, as we found out. He kind of pulled a Phelan on us. We were just shocked at how tall he was. And Hope is, not the smallest, but definitely not the tallest either. Chad is definitely bigger than her. And we had to keep doing the scene where he grabs her and is yelling at her, but then he get the line wrong, so he'd have to grab her and shake her and yell at her again. And it was just looking really intimidating, and we were just sort of like, I hope this plays okay. But, fortunately the scene is so short that, it's only like 2 lines, I think. Yeah, see, that's it. But, I mean, it's like he couldn't get the line right, so we just kept doing it over and over, and it was just looking freaky. I think mostly just because of the, the size of the two of them. And we had to set up before that she was not really good with anything mechanical. Which is why, obviously there's such a difference. So, but I mean, it's not like when you hand her a toy, it's be like, well, wait, she was brilliant before, wasn't she? It's that, no, they got the imprints put in their head. People seem to really like this scene. Actually, my dad, when watching this, said his favorite performance of mine was actually just as the writer. It was as myself. And originally, it was written a little bit more seriously, a little bit more dramatically. But again, I was sort of like, I probably wouldn't do that. I'd probably be a little bit more, well, like this, really. Trying to crack a joke. If it doesn't work, just go back to, this. But if originally I was much more in control, I knew how everything went, and I would say this stuff as the all-knowing creator, but it just didn't seem to flow. It seemed too self-indulgent, too. So I liked mixing it up, making it a little bit more, it came from a guy who was just, an anybody, which I think is more fascinating anyway. And you had a little bit more humor in there. Like, the Rumble Mitts line wasn't in there originally, I threw that in. And, he's legitimately confused by it, too, This scene plays pretty well. I was very happy with how it's turned out. And I like cutting in between the action with this, a scene of dialogue. And it's very slow and it's very quiet, and then you cut back to the really extreme stuff. And this really is my theory on characters. I mean, it's that if you have a good character, you let the characters tell the story. You let them tell you what to do. True, you still have to create the character and you have to really understand the character, but once they're there, you let them do all the work. You just document it. Where I'd be really well to have these, all these backgrounds were him, with the exception of the blue sky clouds. That was mine. But he did all these sort of hellish backgrounds and made Mati look much more intimidating and threatening. It's funny how we still work in the goat porn, even though that was the last movie, and yet we made 2 references to it in this one. Now, this was something we actually had Rob dub this dialogue when we first shot it to make it go a little faster. so Brad didn't have to memorize the lines. But then we realized we forgot to actually have Brad say his lines. So the same day that he visited to shoot the last episode of Nostalgia Critic, he actually recorded these lines as well. That looks green screen, but actually that was part of the set. Jim put a color filter on there and played with some of the shadows. I think we mimicked Return of the Jedi pretty well with this. And I think, too, the people who are sort of like there's too much mimicking in this movie, I think the point was that when you get to the comedy where, like, the executor says something out of character that the Emperor wouldn't say, it's to set up the laugh for that. It's to set up that, you know, if you just had this guy who was constantly talking wacky, who was constantly doing funny things and goofy things, it wouldn't be funny. You have to set up that this is the Star Wars kind of world, and we're giving you the same situation, it's just now we're adding these little punchlines and these other funny little gimmicks. I think they worked out so well, personally. And I really think the majority of people actually think they work out pretty well, too. You know, there's just always going to be that... you know, that side that thinks it doesn't. If you don't like it, don't like it. It's fine. Yes. I like this. I mean, this wouldn't be as funny if you didn't set it up like what was going on in Return of the Jedi. If you set up that seriousness with Luke knocking him to the ground and Vader, you know, essentially being backstabbed. Because a lot of these scenes we actually just used to say when we watched Return of the Jedi, where he says, strike him down with all your hatred. We used to just mimic Vader going, what? That wasn't in the company contract? Or the one that we've always wanted to use and we finally got a chance to is when Luke would throw his lightsaber off. That we'd have a cat go, Row! Always wanted to do that joke. We finally got to do it. I just saw the fact there was a cat in the room the whole time. Incidentally, that scene a moment earlier where Rob does that smile, that's actually a clip I played backwards after he was done saying a line. Again, just find what you can. You can make reuse of it. It was great to use the Mars music because in Star Trek VI, which we're mostly mimicking here, used music that was taken right from Mars. I think I heard that the director actually wanted to use Mars as like the soundtrack, or the planets as the soundtrack, but they wouldn't let him. So we did it. Love that. I love that walk away. I love all this, you know, just sort of this very bizarre, it's just very bizarre chaos. And then, you know, contrasted with this very calm but also kind of tense world going on as well. So it's never too much. It's never too much action because you're constantly cutting back to this. You're cutting back to something a little different. And I think it equals out really well. And it came out actually very close to what was written. I sort of thought we'd have to move things around a bit in terms of editing. To make it flow a little better. But this actually flowed okay. This is actually very, very close to what was in the final script. People also say actually they were okay. It really felt like two separate people. And I didn't want to do one of those shots where it's like the split screen, because you know the only reason you would do it is to show off that you can do a split screen. Because in a lot of shots, this is how people do most shots when they have conversations. They usually don't have them in the same shot. So I would only do a split screen if I felt that's what was needed for the scene. That's what was needed for the shot, which it never was, so I never did. I love the idea of him looking for painkillers because you don't know if it's for him or the rest of the crew. It's probably just for him. So here the whole Bennett thing starts to come back a little bit more with the, you know, wanting to help and with the psychic powers and stuff like that. I should have had one more scene, one more line or something. But it still turns out great. I mean, it's great having Bennett as Tetsuo come in and have him shout, Kaneda! It's great. Here's another scene that actually has a lot of talking, too. It's a good mesh-up of, like, a lot of talking, a lot of action. Something like this wouldn't work earlier because then it'd just be a repeat. You know, it's good. It's like when you have the action, you have the action. We have the talking, you have the talking. But for the climax, I mean, you can mesh it up and you can kind of have fun with it. I love his read on. Yeah, that stuff's nasty. The what's his name? Bennett coming in, dropping to the ground. That actually my effect too. I don't do many effects. When I do, I'll point him out. There you go. And this really does work better. Like when he goes in the machine, he would look like, you know, Tetsuo. It just sort of makes more sense. You know, instead of having like he was dressed up like that from the beginning, and they would kind of act in the characters. And I mean, this is just so much better. And again, everyone has their scene, and we just keep, you know, hitting various movies. This is probably. I wonder if this is the movie that has the most sci-fi references in it. Actually, well, where if anyone's ever done a count. I'd just be curious what the count is, honestly. Hell, actually, maybe even just any movie. Does this have the most movie references in it? I actually do wonder. Somebody on Wikipedia or something could do a count. I love this dialogue. Roth sort of thought he was hammering it a bit. And it probably is, but I think it really works. Again, it just ties into what it's all about. If it was just quoting the movie, you'd just be in the movie, but still reminding people of what this is about. You know, our vision, one vision, none others, no room for other points of view and other opinions and stuff. You know, it's ours, and we'll make laws about it, and we'll blah, blah, blah. So I think it really hits home. These sort of zaps of him going, you know, ooh, he's improvised a lot of that. It was definitely very funny. Again, this is all stuff that we always sort of joked about if we were to Return the Jedi parody. So it's like this has been sort of years in the in the writing or making or whatever. This mirror effect doesn't turn out quite as good as I wanted, but I think it still works. It's worth it just to see Brad try to lift him up. Everyone thinks we saved the height jokes for Mickey, but we'll throw them at Brad too. There's another sort of moral of the movie here, just stated very, very easily. Did I mention Brad's claustrophobic too? Not only do we keep him in that incredibly hot room in that mask, sweating up a storm and everything, but he's also claustrophobic. So what a trooper. This smoke here, I always had this effect, but Rob had this whole smoke effect there, and that really helped that joke come alive. Actually, we were talking about possibly just having the mask just be the helmet. And that's it, because I was debating whether or not it'd be funny if we don't see his face during these scenes, or maybe it'd be more powerful if you did see his face, but it was so much funnier if you didn't. that was an improv there. I wanted to keep it. No in the hold 'em, no in the fold 'em, no one to die! There's Linkara. I always love those scenes in movies where it looks like they're not going to make it, and then that one element you forgot about comes in and saves the day. It's fun. I swear that Lewis actually said that line pitch for pitch from Star Trek 6. It's almost identical. All right, now we're giving him something else to shoot at. This delivery that Phelan gives in a moment here is so great. It's just pure Phelan. Fire! I'm always concerned how many people would get the misquoted Shakespearean references or the other references and stuff. They seem to go over okay. People seem to like them. I think they're hilarious. I wouldn't drop them even if I thought people wouldn't get them. Because I think they're so funny, but... Love it. I think think this was all Rob, the blue shells and red shells and stuff. And this is one of the jokes I was looking the most forward to doing, is the house crashing into the Emperor. I think stuff like this is so funny. Anything where it's like the climax and everything can be wrapped up so like every character, every villain could be taken out like this, you know, in a few blows, I think is so funny. I just love stuff like that. A strange example, but the only one I can think of at the moment, at the end of The Scorpion King. I know it's a really weird reference, but the only great scene in the movie is how the villains die. It's like this guy gets hit, flies backwards, while these other people are trying to set off an explosion. The explosion goes off, the guy flies backwards into the fire, falls right through it, and I think he falls on like another bad guy or something. It's like just wrapping it up all so nicely in such a comedic way. By the way, we did... Oh, I don't know if I should say. Well, we did shoot a scene of Mecha coming back to life with the Power Glove. So for anyone who thinks, oh, you didn't use the Power Glove or anything, he is going to use it ultimately in one of his videos. So stay tuned. There's your Christmas card right there, right before it blows up. Merry Christmas from Channel Awesome. Of course, just that great reaction of Sampan. Whatever it is, wasn't mine. Oh, now if you look real close there, after it blows up, there's a little speck on the top left that takes off. I know exactly what that is. I was actually almost... I didn't have to ask them for this, but they put it in. It's at the end of Super Metroid. It's if you save the animal friends before the plant blows up, you see a little ship that they escape on, and they actually put that in there. And that made me piss my pants that they put that in there. And yeah, you have to make the world that they're going to enter, you know, that he can enter, you know, look very inviting and very grand. I mean, it's the world, you know, and there's no limitations. And the interesting thing with the ankle bracelet, which everyone's like, it's called an anklet. It's called ankle bracelet, too. How do you think they come up with anklet? But the thing with that is that we had it written in, so we had a reason why the house had to take off, you know, but they get rid of it pretty fast. So it didn't seem like it had that much of a purpose, but then when I was doing this scene, I realized this is very similar to when I'm going to leave the first time. And I said to myself, well, why don't I turn around and why don't I see the ankle bracelet isn't there anymore? It's seeing that nothing is holding me back. And it's one of those happy little accidents, and it's actually one of my favorite little moments in there. I actually think that really adds a lot. You know, just to show there is nothing holding him back now. Two pieces of music I've fallen in love with while doing it. One is Jupiter. This is from Jupiter. And it is beautiful music. I mean, it's just... Listen to that. Unbelievable music. And then the other is... I'm blanking at the name of it, but it's by Mahler. It's when we're going into the plot hole. And when the house is going into the plot hole. And, man, just beautiful music. Just fell in love with it. Here's a little Dark Knight reference here. Maybe a little Last Crusade here. I mean, it was certainly an influence here. I don't know if I'm directly making fun of it, but... you want to throw it in there too. Throw it in there. For whoever's keeping count. Of course, nobody would actually step and stand that way, but, you know, visually it's more dramatic. I was actually impressed with, even though there's a few endings here in a sense, like it just sort of keeps ending and ending, but nobody ever seems to complain. Nobody's ever like, you know, oh, come on, just wrap it up, just have it end. Everyone's actually, all the endings seem to logically lead to one another, and it's stuff you want to see wrapped up. It's stuff you want to see taken care of. I was really pleased by that. I'm pleased that people weren't like, oh, now what? Oh, what? The plot hole's gonna fall apart. Come on, just wrap it up. But people seem to be okay because we keep throwing in new surprises in there, and new turns, with like Rolf showing up, or the critic not leaving, or Mati finally leaving, or pointing out all the plot holes of the world, all that stuff. It turned out really well. Scenes like this you feel really awkward doing in front of people, but both Matthew and Bennett did it very well. They're in front of a green screen and everyone's, either watching them or doing their own work or something like that. And, you have to act like you're looking at this thing that, is trying to destroy the world, and you're trying to sympathize with it and really reach its heart and everything. And it's hard when, you're just in this tiny corner of a room and everyone's watching you. They both did very well. Bennett, I know for a while has said he's sort of want to do more dramatic stuff. So it felt right to sort of have him at the end here, and him, and again, start talking about duos. Him and Matthews start to form a little bit more of a, of a relationship too. By the end, I mean, they actually seem pretty close, and even though it didn't start from the beginning, you do sort of feel it grow. It seems like where I say your story sucks and then the writer shouts back, you suck. I mean, that wasn't in the script, but it's like it adds that little bit of comedy. Again, you can't go too serious. We're still essentially a comedy. We're there to make people laugh, and even if it's not like a knee slapping kind of laugh, as long as you're showing, you're still trying. You're still trying to be funny. Um, you know, it does reflect on the entire product. For some reason, Rob really likes the when Bennett says, it's too late, let's go. He like really likes that delivery. It's a good delivery. I just don't know why to single that one out. Maybe he'll explain his commentary. Yeah, I think it's a good line there. I've always wanted to have that line in something, and I'm glad I finally got in there. Here's a line that we just. What do you think of that line? It's just a line we sort of kept quoting on set. It's just sort of an odd line. It's odd the way it's delivered. It's odd when it's said. It's just an odd line, but we couldn't cut it. We just really liked it. Whether you take it seriously or funny or whatever, we just really have fun with it. Yeah, it even turned out to be the song. So, James Rolfe here. Actually, I was shocked how many people did not get that it was James Rolfe. People said they were legitimately surprised. There were definitely people who figured it out, but I was kind of shocked that that everyone didn't put it together. But good for us. He was actually driving back from shooting his movie. And I just remembered when I was talking to him, it just looked like he survived a war. I mean, he was just like shaken, and he was just. I think the idea of filming something else right after that sort of freaked him out, but when he saw just how quick it was and easy it was, I mean, he was sort of like, oh, okay, well that's nice, that's good. I mean, as intense as, like, our 6 day thing was, I mean, it's like he had to be out there for months, with a much bigger crew, much more to risk. Um, Maybe that's why I don't get quite as freaked out at these productions, or when they're done. I don't see him as big a deal because I just think of like what people like him have to go through. I mean, with just months and months of stuff that can go wrong and does go wrong, and the mistakes and the accidents and stuff. I mean, it is just so stressful for anyone to go through. Which is not to say the 6 days weren't stressful, but man, just imagining like several months of that. And believe it or not, we actually did shoot a cameo for the Video Game Nerd movie too. So whether or not he'll use it, we'll see. But shh, shh, shh. I never know if it kind of got through what I was aiming for. Again, this was my idea that the plot holes sort of engulfed the universe, and then the critics sort of keep it under control. I mean, the idea is that in a sense, nothing has really changed. You know, we've always sort of lived in a world where we don't have the answers. We don't know everything. There are things that don't make sense. You know, but now the philosophy is we know they are. We know we're never going to know the answer to these, so we can actually take comfort in that. Oddly enough, uh, you know, and really, it's sort of a philosophy. It's like that you should have now. You're not always going to have the answers. You're not always going to know everything. And instead of taking fear out of that, there's a bizarre kind of comfort you can take out of that. And it comes through okay. There was an alternate ending we had with Santa Christ, giving the speaking of Santa Christ, with Santa Christ giving the speech at the end, which was much more warm and heartfelt, but it didn't make as much sense because Insano would know what happened. Santa Christ also explains what happens to the critic too, but in the other version we sort of forgot to write that in. So we shot two versions, but the Insano one did seem more appropriate. So I did go with that one, hoping that people would just get the idea of what happened. And most people get the general idea. That one with Bjork at the end there, that was sort of a response to that she was actually supposed to be in Kick-Assia, and we forgot to put her in. She was going to be in Suburban Nights, but then scheduling made it so that she couldn't get it in there. So we finally got her in one of these anniversary specials. But it's a joke late. It's I Believe in Santa Christ. This was a scene I was almost thinking about cutting, because for time, really. But it was a nice, is this the end kind of thing, because a lot of people didn't know if we were going to be ending, what we were going to be ending. We just said, this is the end. They didn't know it was going to be the end of the anniversaries, or the Nostalgia Critic, or just the whole thing, ThatGuyWithTheGlasses.com and Channel Awesome. They didn't know. So this was a little bit of a nicer, hey, this could be the end. This could be it. And it played really nice. Even if you know it's not going to be the end, it's still knowing that they think it could be over after this. It's a nice moment. It's the perfect amount of heart and corniness, and you know, end on a joke, of course, as well with the Bothans. Great, great dolly shot here. Love it. Here's that other music I was talking about that I've just fallen in love with. I just adore it. The other music we had here was okay. You know, it was sort of this guitar, you know, like, sort of like in Dune, sort of that, it's like, it's sort of its own thing, but yeah, I wasn't attached to it, and Rob found this music, which was actually played during the, when Luke is hitting Brad too, we just slowed it down. Love that shot. That's a great shot. That's just, I mean, it's like we're just in a room, but this suddenly seems so massive and so big. And that's always what we're going for. We're going with something that, you know, sort of story and character-wise is so massive and so big, but with production-wise, it can look so cheesy and, you know, look at what we're wearing. But you forget we're wearing that for the moment. You know, I love doing stuff like that. My delivery, actually, I shot later. I shot with the two of us. We shot at the time, and then we just did his takes. Because he couldn't stay for very long. This is a Ghostbuster reference, for anyone who didn't get it. Now, all the other scenes with him, it was actually me in the suit. But again, we have like the exact same ring, so you couldn't tell. Now, this is funny because the way it was edited before is essentially what you see, but Rob didn't like me putting in the line about somebody has to, you know, meld with it, somebody has to keep it stable. And thank God I did put it in, though, because people are still kind of confused about exactly what happened. I think it's, you know, I think it kind of explains itself, but, you know, some people are still confused. I mean, he's the plot hole. I mean, he melds with it, and, you know, and also engulfs the universe so that, you know, but if it engulfs the universe, it would still be out of control. You know, it'd still be whatever, getting smaller, bigger, and then the mistakes would, you know, be still more colossal. So he's there to sort of keep it stable. And Phelan did these effects. Oh man, he got this like just perfect the first time. I was really shocked at how well he got what I was going for. Because I was trying to show him references. I'm like, you ever see Matrix? Not really. You ever see Watchmen? Not really. You ever see? Not really. So I tried to show him these clips. I just sort of said, do like a comparison of this. Or maybe he did see them, but he didn't know the scenes I was talking about. And yeah, he really sold it. This is the piece of music I was talking about, by the way, that would match the computer beat or the beat of the plot hole. It was nice going back here, just story-wise, because it seemed like this is where everything sort of started with the plot hole and throwing Mati. Essentially, this is where the movie starts with the flashback, too, is in that field. We almost couldn't do it because it was getting pretty cloudy, and we thought it might rain, and the rain was sort of on again, off again. Thank God we shut inside. But so we had a backup that we would shoot inside the house. Or maybe in the basement, like ask that guy's basement, and they just already be there for the party then. But thankfully it worked out well. How can you not crack up when you see him in that getup? Now watch Kyle. And that makes sense, because Kyle hasn't seen Santa Christ before, so he would make a little, what the fuck? So very nicely done. Rob sort of put this nice golden filter over the whole thing to make it a little bit more, not just like Star Trek 3, but just sort of this nice, you know, sort of very golden ending, you know, and it's very warm, it's very nice. And again, you think we're gonna go totally for the heartfelt and blah blah blah, then we throw in, you know, our joke. Clarence, your name is Clarence. Music here again is great. I just kept ripping off from Jupiter and finding various bits and slowing it down, speeding it up. Now, Insano always popped up at the end to say, give me back my stuff. It was whether or not he would give the speech about what happened. And one was more scientific and one was more philosophical. Santa Christ was more philosophical. But, you know, again, explaining more what happened to the critic and what this means for the future and stuff like that, where Insano could actually say, it did exactly this, I know, because I'm a scientist. And this is mostly in reference to Back to the Future 3. Which is, I just really love the scene where he's, your future hasn't been written yet. No one's has. Make it a good one. You know, it's just such a nice, warm, good feeling. And I think if Christopher Lloyd had those glasses on, he'd be just as heartfelt. See, I don't know if I like that. I don't know. I probably should have rewritten that. Nothing makes sense. Isn't that great? Crazy's the new normal. It's like, it still adds up. I mean, it still works, but it was essentially that really nothing has changed. You know, it's that now there's sort of a reason for all the stuff that doesn't make sense. But maybe there always was, you know? I don't know. It still works. I like it. Especially here. I think I even told him, I said, just do Doc Brown from Back to the Future 3. That's what I'm spoofing. And it does make this joke so much funnier. I found that when I switched it out, it has Santa Christ do the explaining and then just Insano come in and do that. It wasn't nearly as funny. Insano giving that whole delivery and then pulling out the gun is hilarious. This I shot several days later. Actually, I shot about a week before it went up. Isn't where the pirate used to do his stuff too? This was one of those holdovers. I mean, it's like really we got stuff done on the days we wanted to get done. It just went like late into the night, like 2 a.m. The only thing we really had to pull over into the next morning was this scene. So it looks like night, but actually it's like early morning. But most of the people got to go back to their hotels after this. We then shot some green screen stuff, and then we did Brad and Luke's stuff with the Executor, which also went ass late. This was Hope's idea to have the red in her hair when she turns around. Now the one with everyone that sort of had like a story arc or something like that we had to reference at the end, and this one we had two things written. I wasn't satisfied with either, so we sort of improvised this thing. Lindsay, Joe, and Lewis, they all sort of made this up, and I think it's pretty funny. I think it works. That was improvised. Brad's little sniffing there. Now, with the end coming up here, when Matthew turns and sees the ghost me and the ghost Brian. We had a few things that wasn't exactly Hayden Christensen. Hayden Christensen was actually sort of a last minute thing. Originally it was just going to be a little Yoda. But they were sort of like, I don't know. And then we were saying maybe it should be Kyle as Yoda. Like he just sort of steps in there either as a ghost or he just physically steps in there. And then finally we were just thinking about what's the one that everyone remembers. Well, everyone remembers that replacement when they replace Hayden Christensen with the older Darth Vader in the redone Return of the Jedi. So we went with that. Good looks there. Good looks from both of them. They both nailed that down. And here's this shot, of course, that's in Return of the Jedi, which, why the hell would they all line up like that? They wouldn't, but it's a great final shot of everybody. And it's weird. It's interesting that the last reference we do is an Akira reference with I Am the Nostalgia Critic, which is mimicking I Am Tetsuo. And originally, I tried it without music, and it did not work as well. I even tried it without the space background. It just didn't work as well. So it seemed to make more sense to actually have the music in there, especially such good music. Again, that's Jupiter. And yeah, so we sort of, we had him left in there. It just makes sense. The Nostalgia Critic would ultimately become a giant movie mistake. So we're very proud of that. And here, Leon actually did his own green screen here, and a friend of his actually did the effects, the sort of background fire and smoke and all that stuff. I know I want something, because we always had something over the credits, whether it be a drawing or whatever, and Marion, unfortunately, was working on the cover for the limited edition of To Boldly Flee. So so I just decided to go with this, because I had so many of these, and these were just going to go on the bloopers on the DVD anyway. But they were just so damn many. I was like, well, maybe this can fill out, and it did. I don't think we ever actually had a line written in the script of what the Executor would say. I think he just turns around and it hits him, and we both agreed that he should say something, and we just improvised all these. I think my dad was up there too when we were filming these. Any of these would probably have done okay, but they're all wonderful. Again, from a guy who says he can't act. These are so funny. That's my favorite, that little reaction there. Oh, hey, it's that plant in the corner. Trying to think of any wrap-up things I can say here. I mean, really the only things that I can say is that it was a tough shoot for everybody, but everybody pulled through, and everyone just did such great work, and were dedicated, and just got all the way through without much sleep. I mean, none of us got much sleep, and they pulled through. And in the end, I mean, I think it really is true. You have to be a little mad to really enjoy this stuff, and to think it's not anything. Come on, give me more. And everybody, sort of joined in that madness for a bit, and I really do thank them for for dipping into that chaos. I think that's a great song too. Sad Panda always does these great songs, and they're so damn catchy too. I'm always impressed with how catchy they are. There you go. Even right there, dedication to the madness. But obviously, you don't end on that. You end on your dedication to the Bothans. You know that they died to bring us the information. And here's our extra little ending here. This is an ending. My original thought was gonna have that I would be hanging up the coat and hat in the closet, and then Rob would come in and say, "What are you doing?" You know, "Oh, just hanging up the coat and hat." And he's like, "Well, it's on the bed there." And I look, and it's on the bed, even though I just hung it up. And the idea was that the plot hole and the mistakes were still going, you know, and the nostalgia critic was sort of keeping track of it. And then I put it in the closet and sort of keep it a little open. Yeah, but it was a little too hard to grasp. A little too ambiguous too, and it wasn't quite that funny either. So I mean, I like this because this is both kind of funny and kind of you know, kind of serious too. And this is essentially where it started. You know, it started with the two of us. I mean, we're the writers doing this thing, and it was great to get Rob in on the ending too. And we just came in and we had kind of an idea what we were gonna do, but we weren't entirely sure, so we kind of improvised it a bit. The original ending I had was a little too much like the ending of Mystery Science Theater. And this is a little bit like it too, but the original was just they would watch a good movie and still make fun of it. But we wanted to add a little bit more of an edge to it. So we liked the idea that they would actually make fun of the reviews. What else is left to review? Well, the reviews. So that makes sense. And then you're going to see me scooch down here in a second. That's because I'm going to get this shot right after of the coat and hat. Oh, so you're not supposed to see the top of my head or the back of my head. See, there I go. And we improvised these. Big shout out to Jillian, by the way, who was the script supervisor and so good at pointing out stuff that, you know, didn't quite add up or something that didn't match the script, and then continually saying, sorry for pointing it out. And I was just like, nope, point it out. I miss this stuff all the time. So she was very, very, very good at them. Very, very organized. So definitely a little shout out there. And there we go. Guys, everybody who, you know, just made the Nostalgia Critic what it is, you know, but with the support or filming, or, I mean, every little bit. I mean, it's like what I said in the story, where every little character, everything in the background, everything in the foreground counts. That's the same with the fan base and any kind of success. Just everything plays a part. And you people watching and the people that worked on these, just everybody who contributed, even the smallest way. All I can say is there's not enough thanks in the world I can give you. So thank you so very much again. It was a great run.